A man, drowning in debt from loan sharks and unable to pay, thought that jumping from this high-rise building would be his escape. Suddenly, Ji-hoon showed up. Even though he's terrified of heights, he forces himself to climb to the rooftop, all because he has received a request for help from this desperate man. After accepting 1,000 won, Ji-hoon promised to get him out of this mess. Knowing where the loan sharks operated, Ji-hoon took his partner and went straight to their office, ready to get back the money the man owed. But it looked like nobody was in. The two made themselves at home, even ordering 2 servings of black bean noodles while waiting for the loan sharks. They'd barely taken 2 bites, still waiting for the loan sharks, when out of nowhere, a bold-looking woman stormed in and started searching the place. The girl leading the charge is an intern prosecutor. Coincidentally, they had also received a tip-off for an investigation. She shows up, assumes the 2 guys are the bad guys, and doesn't even let them finish their noodles. She just dumps the whole bowl on the table. Surprisingly, it turns out they weren't the owners of this office. To overcome her embarrassment, the girl introduced herself and then proceeded to search the office on her own. Just then, the loan sharks returned. To prevent them from being taken away by the girl, Ji-hoon told them to hire him as their attorney to handle the situation, because once they are investigated, what awaits them in prison. These loan sharks, however, were a cowardly bunch, and upon hearing this, they hastily invited Ji-hoon to be their lawyer. Ji-hoon, who had been waiting for this very moment, quickly showed off his skills. He asked about Ma-ri's legal warrant. After slowly calming down and walking to the window to watch the sunset, counting down 5 seconds, he realized something was off here, and he said that as a prosecutor, she must follow the law. Ma-ri was a bit confused until Ji-hoon pointed out that it was now past 7 p.m. Ma-ri then realized that she had been searching until nightfall, and her search warrant was valid only during the day. Just like that, Ma-ri angrily left. Relying on his prodigious calculation ability, Ji-hoon quickly calculated the attorney fees for the loan sharks. A retainer fee of 5 million won, a defense fee of 50 million won, a prosecutor resolution fee of 40 million won, plus a procedural fee of another 5 million won, totaling 100 million won. He didn't forget to add the cost of 3 bowls of black bean noodles. As a result, his clients no longer had to pay the debt. Not only that, but the other party also compensated them an additional 3 million won. After everything was settled, Ji-hoon casually took a stack of money, only to be asked if he hadn't already calculated the total. But Ji-hoon is the truth. He said it's for overtime. Though confused, they had to let him leave. Outside, the man didn't know what to say. He could only use this small amount of money to express his gratitude. However, Ji-hoon refused. Not only that, he used the remaining overtime money, put it in the man's money bag, and said, with this money, you can start a new life. Ji-hoon patted the man on the shoulder and told him to come find him if he had any problems in the future. The man was so touched that he teared up. Once again, the man sincerely thanked him, but he had already turned to leave. The next day, his law office welcomed a new client, a happy family. But last night, the husband only lightly bumped into a drunk man, but was misunderstood as a robber and was arrested. How does that make any sense? Could something that ridiculous happen? But after carefully reviewing the documents, Ji-hoon had an expression of disbelief, because the husband had been to prison 4 times before, all for theft. He really didn't want to help someone like that, but when he saw their daughter was undergoing treatment at the hospital, he was moved. With a daughter suffering from heart disease in the hospital, would the man do something so rash? Therefore, he decided to go meet the husband. Stepping outside, he accidentally witnesses a scene where a wife is stressing over hospital bills. His assistant, standing nearby, can't help himself and goes over there. But after hearing that the hospital bill is 130 million, he nearly faints from low blood pressure. He is still crashing at Ji-hoon's place, barely able to take care of himself. But he has a hero complex and a tendency to prioritize appearances over his actual health. So for the sake of his pride, Mu-jang still agrees to help them. Then Ji-hoon went to see the husband. Noticing the man's bandaged hand, Ji-hoon asked him to swear on his daughter's name that nothing was stolen this time. The man, hearing this, earnestly promised he was telling the truth. Hearing the man's firm affirmation, Ji-hoon felt a bit reassured. After leaving, Ji-hoon took his assistant to check out the toilet. Don't get the wrong idea. It was just the scene of the crime. The two retraced the man's steps, examining the places he had been to verify their imagined scenario. Right after that, a super awkward scene occurred. The 2 men stood in the bathroom for a whole hour, just watching people pee. Finally, the wait paid off. The target appeared, and he was a drunk guy. As he was about to fall, Ji-hoon rushed over to catch him. The man said thanks, but who knew? Ji-hoon straight up reached in and pickpocketed the man's wallet from his coat. A little later, the two were hauled off to the police station. Right then, Mujang hurried over too. After the man got the lawyer's business card, his attitude did a 180. He even cheerfully handed Ji-hoon his card after they got out. What a smooth operator. A situation like this for Ji-hoon would just be a simple misunderstanding. But for a guy with 4 priors, it's gonna be seen as theft. It's obvious, but it's so unfair to the husband. In the investigation room, who would have thought that the one questioning the husband would be Ma-ri? After hearing the opposing lawyer demand a trial, she was furious and went to her superior. Because last night, thinking this case could be wrapped up quickly, she had pushed the man to plead guilty and even write a letter of remorse. And now this happens. Following her boss's gaze, Ma-ri spotted a guy sitting there, wearing a watch and sunglasses. Oh, what a surprise. Talk about a small world. The two of them recognized each other, and the air was thick with tension. From her boss's conversation, Ma-ri learned that Ji-hoon used to be a public prosecutor. But then, he quit and became a lawyer. Ma-ri, fuming, demanded to know what he meant by requesting to take part in the trial. Right away, she shoved the husband's written confession letter at Ji-hoon to see. Without even looking, Ji-hoon immediately tore up the paper. He knew for sure that the man had written this letter on purpose, thinking of his daughter. Because he'd heard he could easily handle this, Ma-ri refused to listen to this explanation. But her superior beside her kept asking about the letter. If the man could firmly maintain his innocence, then a retrial wouldn't be simple at all. If he was found guilty after the retrial, he would have to spend even more time in prison. But upon hearing this, he retorted, "Has it never occurred to you that there's a very real possibility the defendant is innocent? This guy's been in jail 4 times for theft. He willingly gave up his dirty work for his wife and his sick daughter, thinking he could finally live an honest life. But then, one time he caught a drunk guy who was about to fall, and the drunk guy accused him of stealing, landing him back in jail. Including this time, it's his 5th time in the slammer. Looking at the case file, everyone just assumes he's the thief. Even the judge up on the bench thinks so. He's furious and shouts, 'From the beginning, you've been saying I'm guilty. So what's the point of this trial?' He keeps saying he didn't steal anything, but nobody believes him. As a lawyer who only charges 1,001 for his services, he truly believes that this father, who's using his daughter's name as a guarantee, definitely didn't steal. But Ji-hoon's way of doing things is pretty strange. On the day of the trial, not only does he bring a weird lunchbox, but he also says this to the judge in court. "Let me ask you, if you were having dinner with your boss at a restaurant, would you eat your meat with the sauce on the side or dipped in the sauce?" His question makes everyone laugh. Ma-ri, seeing that he's not serious, steps in and asks the judge to stop Ji-hoon from asking such questions. But Ji-hoon just ignores her and throws out another bizarre question. "Do you prefer steamed or fried matsu?" Finally, the judge lets someone answer the first question. "I prefer dipping." Ji-hoon, after getting his answer, responds, "So if nobody asked you and just poured the sauce all over, would you be angry?" "I wouldn't be happy, but I wouldn't be angry." Then, the judge calls the witness. The witness says the man is the thief, pointing at the defendant because his hand was right where his wallet was. What's more, he also knows this guy's been to jail 4 times before for theft. So he's sure the guy's the thief. At this point, Ji-hoon walks up and starts grilling the witness, asking if he was drinking that day, specifically, hard liquor. The witness hesitates, saying he only had a couple of glasses of wine. Seeing that he's not admitting it, Ji-hoon then plays a video from that day, when the witness was hanging out with friends. In the video, it's clear he's not only mixing strong drinks himself, but also downing several glasses. You gotta know, that kind of booze can easily make someone lose it. So, wouldn't that prove he was drunk at the time? And wouldn't be able to clearly understand what was going on? At this point, Ma-ri stands up. And as the prosecutor, she's still totally firm in her opinion. She brings up a bunch of evidence about the guy's criminal record, and she doesn't hold back, saying he's had a habit of stealing since he was a kid, constantly in and out of jail. How much can you trust a guy like that? Pretty quickly, the judge starts to get unsure, but for the most part, he's still leaning toward Ma-ri's side. Old habits die hard. The situation isn't looking good, so Ji-hoon has to pull out his last resort, which is also the evidence that proves the guy is innocent. After getting the okay from the judge, Ji-hoon opens the lunchbox. Ma-ri is shocked when she sees what's inside because there's nothing in it. Absolutely nothing. That represents the fact that there's no evidence proving the defendant is guilty. But if all the supposed evidence were put in the box, wouldn't that mean he is guilty? Ma-ri, stubborn as ever, digs in her heels and refuses to give up. She argues that if it was an attempted theft, they could use circumstantial evidence to prove it. Hearing this, Ji-hoon has no choice but to ask the defendant and the witness to reenact the scene from back then. He tells the witness to close his eyes and imagine he's drunk. But right after he says that, the witness's wallet silently lands in his hand. Just like that, in only 3 short seconds, the defendant was able to snatch the wallet. The witness didn't even suspect a thing, which proves one point. Even when he's not drunk and aware of what's happening, the defendant can still take the wallet without making a sound. The 4 previous thefts all happened days before he was caught. So why this time, when the witness was wasted and out of it, could he suddenly spot the defendant stealing? Clearly, the defendant was just trying to help the witness up at that time. In the end, through the jury's vote, the defendant is found not guilty. This is the first time Ma-ri has ever lost in court, and her grandfather just happened to be there too. After they get outside, the man is super grateful to him. Ma-ri also admits that she's genuinely impressed. Ji-hoon also happily goes and shakes Ma-ri's hand, because he still wants to rely on her to get compensation for the defendant. The compensation fee is the basic annual salary times 5, because the defendant was locked up for 36 days. All in all, the defendant will get 13 million won, so his daughter will have money for her medical treatment. After this case, Ma-ri becomes a permanent employee, and her boss hands her a piece of paper. This paper is the complaint form that she threw in the trash the other day. The next day, Ma-ri, wearing a pink outfit, brings her best friend to her grandfather's law firm. Her grandfather welcomes them to join his firm. He even arranges positions for them. Only his granddaughter is left with nothing. Grandpa gives her a new internship address. If she can last 2 months there, she'll earn his recognition. After Ma-ri arrives at the place her grandpa sent her to, she immediately gets a bad feeling. She's the top of the class from one of the 3 biggest law firms, a rich heiress with tons of money. Normally, after finishing her internship, she'd be placed in the family's law firm. But Chairman Grandpa assigned her to this weird place. As soon as she gets out of the car, people around her are giving her strange looks. This place is like a town cut off from the rest of the world. She spots a sign up on the 2nd floor. Ma-ri gathers all her courage and heads up, only to find the landlady outside the law office yelling her head off. Ma-ri has no choice but to wait until she leaves before approaching. Staring at the worn-out sign, she feels a bit confused. The lawyer can't even pay rent. What kind of a place is this? She tiptoes over and knocks, but it's weirdly quiet inside. She's thinking maybe she should leave when suddenly, the door creaks open with this super creepy sound. She freezes, totally scared stiff, not moving an inch. Then, a voice comes from somewhere. Hey, she's gone, but some girl is standing here. Who is she? The landlady's daughter? Ma-ri turns around, totally freaked out. Even though she wants to bolt, she remembers what her grandpa said. She must stick it out here for 2 months before joining the family's law firm. Wrestling with her inner thoughts, she decides to go back to that room. Inside, it was a scary sight. The floor was covered in trash, and empty bottles were rolling around. She almost stepped on one if she didn't watch where she walked. 2 men were there, acting sneaky, doing something. But when she got a good look at their faces, what a surprise, old lady. The world is round. You meet familiar faces everywhere you go. Isn't this the 1001 lawyer who won me last time? Ji-hoon could tell even with his eyes closed. Other than an internship, there's no other reason she would be here. Seeing that her thoughts were figured out, Ma-ri felt a little embarrassed. Not knowing how to start the conversation, she clammed up and accused Ji-hoon of being delusional. But as she turned to leave, she dropped her job application on the table. And of course, Ji-hoon noticed it. As he was about to open it, Ma-ri immediately stopped him. She rushed over to snatch back the file, but suddenly, not paying attention to the floor, but it turns out she only grabbed the envelope, not the letter itself. She rushes back and snatches the job application. And seeing those 2 guys laughing just makes her even angrier. She's so embarrassed, she just wants to disappear. So she grabs her stuff and takes off. Back home, Ma-ri tells her grandpa everything, but he's not exactly moved by her sob story. He even says that he probably would have lost that case too, which stuns her. He comforted Ma-ri, saying she only needed to be there for 2 months, because their law firm didn't have anyone like him. He wanted his granddaughter to go and learn. Finally, thanks to his words of comfort, Ma-ri went back to that law office. She even helped Ji-hoon tidy up the room, and her attitude is much more respectful now. Ji-hoon told her to get him a coffee, and she obeyed. But even then, he still rejected her, clearly remembering every insult Ma-ri threw at him last time. This guy definitely holds a grudge. Ma-ri jumped up and started arguing. When did I say that? He wouldn't back down either, replying, You said it back then. The atmosphere was tense, ready to explode. But luckily, Assistant Mujiang showed up just in time to defuse the situation. But Ma-ri was still rejected. and not allowed to join. So, to stay an intern, Ma-ri showed up early the next morning, outside Ji-hoon's office, and started helping the assistant by taking notes on what families needed help with, and registering their information. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon received his first client of the day, a young boy. The boy offered him a 1001 ice cream pop, asking him to help his grandfather. It turns out the boy's grandfather was a security guard at an apartment complex. Every day, he was bossed around by an arrogant man who, upon finding a scratch on his precious car, falsely accused the grandfather of causing it. He even grabbed the grandfather's tie and stomped on his foot. He wanted the grandfather to remember everything. The grandfather, having no money, could only endure the abuse. Just then, Mujang and Ma-ri returned, so all four of them went to the apartment complex to meet the boy's grandfather. But before they could even get a few words out, that arrogant guy showed up. It has to be said that his driving skills were terrible. He sped in without slowing down at all. When he parked, he took up 2 parking spaces, and when he got out, he didn't even apologize to them. Instead, he was totally in his world, talking on his phone. It sounded like someone was about to be promoted to director, and naturally, he ordered the old man to carry his things. At this point, Ji-hoon couldn't take it anymore and stepped forward, saying that his parking skills were beyond bad. He purposely stood in front of him, took a picture, and said he was going to send it to reporters. The guy tried to threaten him, but Ji-hoon wasn't scared. He stated that he was a lawyer, but the guy acted like he was bulletproof, totally unfazed, and even threatened him back. He told the old man that he had money to hire a lawyer, but no money to pay him for the car repairs. Hearing this, the old man got scared and tried to stop Ji-hoon. Seeing his grandfather so timid, the little boy couldn't hold back and spoke up to his grandpa. He said that the lawyer would help him, that he would teach the mean guy who was bullying him a lesson. It seemed like Ji-hoon was also moved by the boy's words. Seeing the scratch on the guy's car, Ji-hoon emptied everything he had on him and found a black marker. In front of everyone's astonished eyes, Ji-hoon calmly drew a line, then another, quickly covering up the scratch. This made the guy go ballistic, but Ji-hoon wasn't done. He pushed the cart the old man had been using at the time to reenact the incident, but the guy complained that he was pushing it too slowly and from too far away. Ji-hoon, hearing this, said, "Okay, got it," and then said, "Watch this." This next move of his made everyone's heart stop, but the scratch the old man supposedly made was gone. Now, it looked like Ji-hoon had caused the damage. If the guy wanted to sue him, Ji-hoon was already prepared to have his lawyer handle it. Surprisingly, the person he was talking about was none other than Ma-ri. If she passed this test, she would be officially hired. It was a total shock, totally unexpected. But if she didn't accept his ridiculous request, she couldn't fulfill her promise to her grandfather to intern here. As the heiress of 3 top law firms, she'd never swallowed such an insult. Little did she know, this seemingly flippant guy was incredibly skilled. For example, the chairman of a famous construction company here was arrested because of worker injuries and deaths. He spared no expense to hire a lawyer, Ji-hoon. He even persistently tried to invite him multiple times, but Ji-hoon kept turning him down. But today, Ji-hoon surprisingly came here and said he wanted to help him reduce his sentence. He didn't need money though, he just needed to win a game of bingo, and then he'd agree to help him. In the end, the old man kept losing because he didn't understand the rules. Actually, the reason Ji-hoon came to see him was all because of that violent guy, who happened to be one of his men. Although Ji-hoon told Ma-ri to handle it, he was secretly observing everything. It's just that Ma-ri didn't know, and she gradually started to lose her good impression of him. From the case involving the arrogant guy's car crash at the apartment, she's figured out 4 ways to deal with it. First, he could pay the guy 501 for the car repairs, but if it were just about paying for the repairs, Ji-hoon wouldn't have needed her in the first place. The second option was for him to go to jail, but if he went to jail, who would Ma-ri intern with? Third, he could pray that someone even crazier crashes into the guy's car. It's pretty clear, from these 3 options, that Ma-ri is intentionally messing with him, and he's extremely disappointed in her. Just then, Ma-ri suggests a final option. She hands him 1001 and tells him she won't take this case, and that he's on his own. After giving him the 1001, Ma-ri takes a deep breath and says, she's a rich heiress after all. Why does she need to put up with this when there are plenty of other law firms? After she leaves, Mujang follows Ma-ri. He was reluctant to let Ma-ri go just like that. And at the same time, he told her something from the past. It was when he met lawyer Ji-hoon. Back then, the factory was ruthlessly oppressing the workers like them. Lawyer Ji-hoon didn't look down on them for being poor. For just 1001, he would become their entrusted lawyer. Even when the 2 sides got into a fight, He, who was empty-handed, bravely jumped in to help them. Ma Ri was a bit confused. Why would a lawyer go to such lengths? Mu Jiang said he didn't understand either, but Ji-hoon was just that kind of person. There wasn't a single case he couldn't handle. Saying all this, he just wanted Ma Ri to reconsider. Ma Ri couldn't answer right away. She said she'd think about it some more. Back home, Ma Ri, driven by curiosity, started searching online for cases he had handled back when he was a prosecutor. On the other side, Ji-hoon wasn't idle either. He investigated the personal driver of that violent guy and, in a drawer, looked into the employee information of the corporation where he worked. Even if Ma Ri didn't help him, he already had 1,000 ways to deal with that guy from the beginning. The next day, Ji-hoon was totally surprised. The rich girl who'd been yelling about leaving yesterday was already back, and she was even getting along with the landlady. From their happy faces, he could tell his rent could probably wait until next month. He raised his hand, welcoming her back. Then, Ji-hoon handed her back 1,001. Just then, the personal driver of that jerk showed up at the law office. From his words, they found out that being that guy's driver was a real pain. Because of a bump, he slowed down at a crosswalk. That guy got furious and threw a bottle at him. He even took out his anger on him if he was in a bad mood, stomping all over his dignity. Because of that, his hand was once broken. If this high-paying job wasn't so urgent, he wouldn't have to put up with this kind of humiliation. Ji-hoon, hearing this, decided to help the guy out. But that meant they wouldn't just be handling the car accident, they'd have to take on this case too. This instantly gave Ma Ri a major headache. So Ma Ri, eager to become a full-fledged intern, came up with a super clever solution. The next day, Ma Ri headed to Cheon Yongbei's company. Before meeting him, she called Cheon Yongbei's secretary to butter them up, but the secretary's response left her confused. Still, to make it through her tough intern life, Ma Ri went on to the guy's office. Looking at that ugly, mean face, Ma Ri was speechless. His arrogant, smug look made her want to punch him. The words were right on the tip of her tongue, but she swallowed them back. What she wanted to say was that she wanted to use the money to settle the car accident the other day. But before she could finish, the office door suddenly burst open. Ji-hoon walked in like a superhero. Ma Ri's eyes went wide, and she quickly grabbed a magazine to hide her face. Turns out, Ji-hoon had gotten there one step ahead of Ma Ri. He saw her sneaking around and followed her, obviously knowing what she was up to. Yongbei was furious that Ji-hoon just barged into his office. But then, Ji-hoon turned the tables on Ma Ri. He told her to look at how stressed out the guy was. See, our return lawyer here couldn't stand it, and came to find you. Yongbei, hearing this, naively thought that Ji-hoon had sent Ma Ri to mess with him. Ma Ri quickly tried to stand up and explain, but Ji-hoon pushed her back down, saying, Ma Ri, just hold on a sec. This is a guy thing. Then Ji-hoon, with a super serious face, started lecturing Yongbei. Yongbei, totally ticked off by Ji-hoon, was about to blow a fuse, and he blurted out the truth. The truth was, that scratch on the car wasn't from the older guy's accident. Yongbei scratched it somewhere else. But even with the truth out there, they couldn't do anything. The old guy was too scared and took all the blame, plus, with no evidence. Yongbei just kept on mocking them without a care. But this whole thing played right into Ji-hoon's plan. Turns out Ji-hoon's goal was to piss Ma Ri off, so she'd focus all her energy on dealing with Yongbei instead of trying to take shortcuts. Ma Ri went to see the security guard who was often bullied by Yongbei. He was still upset about what happened this morning. He didn't have much money, so he had to borrow from various people to gather enough money to pay Yongbei back and give it to Ma Ri, hoping they could resolve the issue peacefully. Then, a little boy gave her his only candy. Ma Ri took the candy and said that was enough. While talking to the guard, Ma Ri understood that at their age, finding any job in the neighborhood was a good thing. Even though Yongbei usually bullied him, the other people in the community were nice. Besides, making money isn't easy, so enduring a little hardship is okay. After the conversation, Ma Ri walked over to a trash can, about to throw away the candy. When the little boy behind her noticed, it wasn't that she didn't want to eat the candy, but having grown up with a silver spoon in her mouth, she was used to eating candies 100 times more expensive than ordinary people. The little boy saw the price tag on the back and was shocked, asking, "It's that expensive?" Ma Ri encouraged the boy, telling him that when he grows up, he needs to take good care of his grandfather. Then she gave all the beef she had just bought in her car to the two of them. Watching the boy's receding figure, Ma Ri's mood also changed for the better. After thinking it over all night, she came up with a plan that could be a win-win. However, she still needed Mu Jiang's help. Actually, if she wanted Yongbei to compromise and not let the uncle lose his job, The simplest way was to make Yongbei respected by everyone. After he left the company, a swarm of reporters rushed him like a horde of ants. Even though he didn't understand what was going on, he blamed the security guard's uncle. But oh, what a surprise! Yongbei saw Mujang endlessly praising him. There was a bullying incident in the neighborhood, and Yongbei was the first to jump in and help. Once Yongbei understood the situation, he immediately put on a kind, serious face and answered the reporter's questions. So, it looks like Yongbei won't be doing anything to the grandpa and grandson anymore. He should be thanking them instead. That car situation is handled. Next up, it's time to let Ma Ri drag him down to the bottom of the well. Meanwhile, Chun Ji-hoon went to see the chairman. After a few days of careful consideration, the man finally confessed. After smoothly passing that hurdle, today is also the first day of the trial. With Ji-hoon's help, he got a suspension of his sentence in the second trial. On the way back to the company, Ji-hoon ran into Yongbei, who was looking for the chairman. That coward bowed deeply to greet the chairman, but when he looked up, it was Ji-hoon. So, the three of them ended up crammed into the back seat. Yongbei was a bit nervous, because he had the attitude of a team leader, which towards Ji-hoon was a little off. When they got back to the company, all of Yongbei's employees were already there. The chairman quickly told everyone to disperse, but Ji-hoon, standing beside him, stepped in. He officially declared to them that he was taking action, pulling out a file he prepared beforehand, ready to sue Yongbei. As soon as the chairman stepped out of his house, not wanting to make a big scene, he asked him what his conditions were. The conditions were simple, but also quite intimidating. Fire this person from the company. However, the chairman hesitated a bit. Ji-hoon then thought of a way to make him an offer he couldn't refuse, playing bingo with him. As soon as the words were out, it suddenly caused a stir. If he lost, he would drop the lawsuit and not interfere in their affairs anymore. The chairman, of course, happily agreed after hearing this. If it went to court, there would be no chance of winning, no matter how good a lawyer they hired. On the other hand, using bingo to decide could be seen as offering a little bit of hope. The so-called game of bingo is making 25 small squares on a square board, and then shuffling the positions of 25 numbers. Two people, unable to see anything, guess the numbers on the board. If the numbers they call out form a line, that person wins. The game is about to start. The blue bingo marks represent Ji-hoon's team, and the red marks represent Yongbei's team. However, before starting, there's one more rule. The two sides can't call out the numbers themselves. Instead, each side will choose a representative to call out numbers for the whole team. Yongbei, of course, will choose the chairman to play. And over on Ji-hoon's side, he's already chosen who will be playing bingo. No need to guess, it's Ma Ri. Ma Ri feels weird, not knowing what Ji-hoon is up to, but she's out of options, so she steps up. The numbers called out are increasing rapidly, and half of the 25 squares are quickly filled. Then, the president calls out number 17. Everyone seems to see a glimmer of hope. He only needs to call out either 23 or 2 to win. On the other hand, the numbers Ma Ri has called are only 2 near each other. Not even 3 close numbers. Just then, Ji-hoon speaks up. He loudly criticizes Yongbei for using the excuse of bullying subordinates to impose punishment. In an instant, Ma Ri thinks of the crime Yongbei committed, which falls under Article 2, Clause 76 of the law. Since there's no number 76, she blankly calls out the number 2, and the atmosphere immediately becomes tense. Seeing how quick-witted Ma Ri is, Ji-hoon breathes a sigh of relief. Thanks to the director's calculations, the president doesn't say 23, but instead says 6. At this moment, Ji-hoon seizes the opportunity and steps up again, using the charge of arbitrarily threatening employees as a reason for Ma Ri to understand. This is Article 23 of the labor law. Now the danger has been resolved. But then the president calls out 15, which opens up a new opportunity. Both sides will be deciding the victory on the number 8. Not waiting for his opponent to think, Ji-hoon quickly gives a hint. I want to use the reasoning and goodwill of a law-abiding person to punish you. This makes Ma Ri recall a sentence Ji-hoon once told her. The sentence related to reasoning and goodwill is on page 108 of the law book. Number 10 has already been called, so the only number left is the last one, number 8. 5 numbers lined up in a row signaled victory. The hall erupted in cheers, and Ma Ri officially became Ji-hoon's apprentice lawyer. That evening, the three of them went out to eat together. Ma Ri, clearly not able to hold her liquor, started talking after just a few drinks. She blurted out her strange thoughts about Ji-hoon, like how his curly hair, combined with the sunglasses he always wears, looks hilarious. Naturally, Ji-hoon, embarrassed and angry, told her she was no longer his apprentice. Mujang headed home early because his wife was waiting, leaving just Ji-hoon and Ma Ri. Since he didn't know where she lived, Ji-hoon took Ma-ri back to the law office. Seeing Ma-ri fast asleep, Ji-hoon looked like he was about to do something, a somewhat affectionate gesture. His hand reached towards Ma-ri's eyes, seemingly wanting to touch them, but suddenly he used 2 fingers to pry her eyes open. Oh my gosh. I thought we were getting a romantic vibe here. But talk about a mood killer. Ji-hoon tried everything, but he still couldn't get her phone to recognize her face. Plus, because of what he did, Ji-hoon had no way to find her family's contact information. The next morning, she woke up, and mortifyingly enough, she remembered every single detail of what happened last night. She was planning to make a run for it before things got any worse, but then she noticed Ji-hoon sprawled out on the floor, sleeping with a newspaper as a blanket. She gently placed a jacket over him and tiptoed away. As she reached the door, Ma-ri felt like something was missing. Looking back at Ji-hoon, she saw her phone was still in his hand. To make matters worse, her mom was calling. Ma-ri gently slid the phone, but unexpectedly, Ji-hoon started sleep-talking, saying, open your eyes so you can go home." Hearing this made her so embarrassed, she wanted to disappear. As the daughter of a prominent family, having someone pry open her eyes last night was a total loss of face. After calling back, her mom said she was already downstairs. Ma-ri opened the window, only to find that her mom had brought a whole mobile makeup studio with her to give her daughter a makeover. Meanwhile, Mu-jang brought a new detective novel to the office. Inside the law office, Ji-hoon was woken up, still muttering, "Open your eyes." At the same time, Ma-ri arrived, having lightly applied some makeup. Not wanting Mu-jang to overthink, she said she had left early the previous night. Seeing the neatly dressed woman in front of him, if Ji-hoon hadn't known what happened last night, he would have been fooled. After some discussion, the law office welcomed a client, a young-looking woman. The case she wanted the lawyer to handle was a murder case. Hearing the word, murder, Mu-jang immediately started shaking. They had never taken on a case like this before, but the woman said her younger brother, who was in jail, told her that Ji-hoon would help her. This made Ji-hoon a bit curious, but the woman just left a file of documents and quickly departed. Ma-ri, curious, opened the file, but after just a glance, her face completely changed. This made Mu-jang curious too. He took a look and immediately said, "Let's pretend I didn't see anything." Seeing their reactions, Ji-hoon took the file. Upon opening it, he realized this was a murder case that had shocked the entire nation. Half a month ago, the victim was the mother of a young man. At 6 a.m. that day, a housemaid arrived at the employer's house to prepare breakfast for them. But unexpectedly, she saw a horrifying scene. A woman, covered in blood, was lying on the floor. By the time the ambulance arrived at the hospital, the woman had already passed away. With such a commotion, when the police entered and searched the house, they discovered, in another room, the young man taking a bath in the tub, completely relaxed. Naturally, the person most under suspicion was this young man, because, up until now, his father's whereabouts were unknown. His mother had tragically died, and to add to that, from what they had gathered beforehand, this young man's relationship with his parents wasn't very good. There was a high probability that he killed his father, disposed of the body, then returned to kill his mother. This incident made him into a devil idol of the century. The firm in charge of this case at the time was still a famous law office, and so was the defense attorney, considered a devil's advocate. Unable to withstand the pressure from public opinion, the firm had no choice but to drop the case. The two began trying to persuade Ji-hoon not to get involved, but Ji-hoon told Mu-jang something. This young man had helped them a few months ago. Because Ji-hoon couldn't afford his rent, he started volunteering at a community center, which is where the young man also appeared. He used all his painting talent to solve Ji-hoon's rent problem at the time, but a problem arose. If his painting skills were so good, he surely wouldn't be short of money and could easily find a high-end law firm. So why did he choose Ji-hoon's law office? This is a mystery. To solve this mystery, Ji-hoon took Ma-ri to the jail to meet the young man dubbed Devil of the Century. But upon meeting him, the impression he left on Ma-ri was his extremely calm expression, as if the matter had nothing to do with her. He insisted that he didn't kill his mother, and that the one who killed her was his long-missing father, because their relationship had always been strained. At this point, Ji-hoon asked another question. There's a huge difference between a high-end law firm and their law office. So why did he want to entrust them with his case? He said he had wanted to ask other high-end lawyers for help, but they felt like he was just trying to use money to get out of trouble. So that's why he turned to them. Ma-ri warned him that if he didn't want to lose in court, he probably wouldn't get out, and he should choose his lawyer more carefully. The young man replied, "I didn't commit a crime, so why should I worry about this?" At night, the three of them, wanting to investigate a murder case, went to a desolate, deserted mansion. The atmosphere was incredibly dark and gloomy. Ma-Ri suddenly encountered an unexpected situation. In the vast estate, a fourth person suddenly appeared beside the three of them. Terrified, Ma-Ri quickly hid behind a tree, her heart pounding and holding her breath. Luckily, at this very moment, Ji-hoon appears like a hero, calming Ma-Ri's frightened heart. Perhaps because the sense of security he brought was so overwhelming, Ma-Ri gradually calmed down. Ji-hoon gave Ma-Ri some instructions, and then gently moved toward the fourth person. Could this be the artist who had been missing for so long? As he got closer, Ji-hoon reached out to grab him, only to discover it was someone he knew. Who is this? It turns out to be Ji-hoon's long-lost best friend, who is also Ma-Ri's childhood friend. It turns out the two of them were working on the same case, except one is on the prosecution's side, and the other is on the defendant's side. To investigate the murder, he had arrived at this mansion before they did. Therefore, the four of them walked around the crime scene together. Ji-hoon told Ma-Ri to go find Min-hyuk and stick together, while making subtle hints and implications for her to act as a spy. He wanted her to follow Min-hyuk around and report any findings back to him. But from Min-hyuk's perspective, this looks like a couple exchanging loving glances. You can tell just by looking at his face that his love rival has shown up. At this point, Min-hyuk and Ma-Ri go upstairs to investigate the second floor, while Ji-hoon and his assistant stay on the first floor, where the murder took place. It's worth mentioning that if that man did kill his wife, he must be hiding somewhere around here right now. But after searching for half the day, the group hasn't found anything useful. When Min-hyuk sees Ji-hoon and Ma-Ri with their heads together, he gets annoyed and interrupts them. The poor guy tries to invite Ma-Ri to his place, but she flat out rejects him. After the three of them get back in the law office's special van, Ji-hoon immediately returns to the scene. He thinks that they might have been too focused on the fact that the murderer disappeared, thus overlooking the obvious, for example, something on the wall. The next day, the manager found a painting that was sold by the artist himself, and the selling price suddenly reached 600 million won. Moreover, in every painting, he painted a person holding an umbrella. Around the same time, Min-hyuk, with the help of the chief prosecutor, borrowed the last painting the artist created. After a quick look, the painting was returned to the seller. On the other hand, Ji-hoon is facing a difficult problem. Last time at the restaurant, Ma-Ri managed to record a video of the second suspect, the housekeeper. The problem was that the distance was too far, so even with the volume cranked up, you couldn't hear a thing. After watching it, Ji-hoon asked the manager for a cup of coffee. And then he started to interpret, based on the lip movements of the people in the video. After finishing his coffee, Ji-hoon had a rough interpretation, and at the same time, Ma-Ri arrived at the law office to tell the two of them that she had already interpreted the video. Turns out Ma-Ri had already asked her grandfather to get lip-reading techniques from someone else. But Ji-hoon still believed his interpretation was correct. He figured out that the conversation went like this. How much does a squid cost these days? Is the price a bit expensive? After watching, Ma-Ri was truly defeated by this genius lawyer. After showing him the lip-reading technique, it turns out the two weren't talking about squid at all, but rather about money. The housekeeper said she was quitting. The young woman didn't want to pay the housekeeper, but unexpectedly, after hearing that, the housekeeper started directly threatening her. But at that critical moment, they were interrupted by a waiter. That being the case, their only option is to go find that young woman and get the full story. Meanwhile, the older sister goes to visit her brother in jail. She tells him about how the housekeeper threatened her that day. It turns out that on that night, the housekeeper said she knew where the painter, who is also their father, was. The brother, after hearing this, acted extremely calm, as if he didn't care about this at all. Soon after, Ji-hoon tracked down the young woman. Ma-Ri, being the straightforward person she is, immediately got straight to the point. Ma-Ri mentioned that they had seen her at the restaurant last night. Ji-hoon, a bit speechless, subtly shifted to a different topic. 5 years ago, her mother and the painter remarried. The brother in jail isn't her biological brother, so why is she so sure he didn't commit the murder? The older sister says that he wouldn't even hurt a bug, let alone kill a person. Plus, after the remarriage, the two of them often argued and fought over various things. This is also why they suspect that their father killed their mother that night. But a statement like that raises another question. If their father killed their mother, why were her last words before dying? Soo-yeon and Min-jae. Regarding this point, the older sister couldn't explain it either, because she also really wanted to know. Over here, after learning about the older sister, the two went to the judge who was present at the scene that night, hoping to get a look at the painter's last painting from her. Unexpectedly, she told them the painting had been sold just today. After that, the woman reported the situation to her reporter husband. Ji-hoon also arrived and came to his side. From him, he learned that the painter had moved to that house 3 years ago. He often sat by the lake near his house to paint, which is the same lake in the last painting the painter created while he was alive. The problem now is that they have to see that painting with their own eyes, as the lawyer can't even afford the rent. Suddenly, a chaebol's daughter appears and follows them around. This heiress, wanting to help him buy the painting, called her chaebol mother. This is the first time she's ever asked her mom for a gift. Her mother, of course, was thrilled to hear this. The daughter hesitantly said, "But it's kind of expensive." It seems like she was worried over nothing. Her rich mom casually replied, "Is it more expensive than our house? We can just sell one of our houses." Once again, someone else's mom never disappoints. That evening, the mother and daughter, all dressed up in their fancy clothes, went to the auction. Their classy vibe made them stand out from the other two guys. You gotta know, everyone at this auction is loaded. It's either this big shot or that big shot. That's why the final item up for auction started with a price tag of 8 figures. Every time someone raised the bid, it had to be by at least 10 million won. Despite being born into wealth, she could only gulp at this point. The painting's price had already reached 180 million won. The woman directly shouted 500 million, thinking victory was within her grasp. Who knew someone else would bid 700 million? The woman, not backing down, immediately bid 1 billion. The price of a painting reaching $1 billion. Would anyone dare to raise it and be called a fool? However, not only did a fool appear, but a huge fool. This guy on the phone directly raised the price to 2 billion won. This turn of events took the mother and son from joy to sudden disappointment. Everyone present couldn't help but express their dismay. Meanwhile, over at the prosecutor's office, Min Hyuk was watching the recording of the chief prosecutor's interrogation of the suspect. The suspect's calm and steady demeanor left the two prosecutors unable to find any openings. But this only deepened their curiosity about this person. Right now, the fate of the artist was unknown, so the indirect evidence wasn't enough to convict the suspect. Min Hyuk went to find the owner of the house behind the villa to check the security camera footage from the night of the incident. Unexpectedly, the footage was too far from the scene and nothing could be heard. After listening, Min Hyuk became serious, watching from the first minute to the last. As it was about to end, he seemed to hear or think of something. Flipping back to the previous statement that said the suspect saw his father that night. At that time, he was wearing hiking clothes and went into the forest along the small lake. From the dark video, this point suddenly seemed off. What's more, he was lying. Min Hyuk then told his assistant to investigate further. That morning at the law office, Marie was feeling awkward about facing Ji-hoon since she couldn't buy the painting last night, especially after she'd guaranteed him she would. Turns out Marie's worries were unnecessary. Ji-hoon's mind was actually on the investigation they had been doing the past few days. Especially after hearing about the artist's last painting, the attitudes of both the reporter and the judge changed. He was sure those two were hiding something. Right then, a package was delivered for Ji-hoon. Curious, they opened it up to take a look. After seeing what was inside, Ji-hoon suddenly declared that he had solved the puzzle. First, he took down a painting hanging on the wall and pretended to be at the suspect's house that night. That's when they discovered something. A mark on the wall where a painting had been, but was now gone. The same kind of mark was found at the crime scene. And that night, he had measured that mark at the scene, and it matched perfectly with the size of the artist's last painting. This meant that the painting originally on the wall had been swapped out by someone, which is how it became the artist's last painting. Then, Ji-hoon held up a forensic sketch in front of them. This was the scenery depicted in the artist's painting, which an expert had previously assessed as being at least 3 years apart in time from the image of the boy with the black umbrella. But why would the artist, just to paint that one figure, paint a lakeside scene from 3 years ago for his final painting? It made no sense. Therefore, the person with the umbrella wasn't painted by the artist, but by someone else who intentionally added it. Or, to put it another way, evidence unfavorable to the killer appeared in the painting at the crime scene. So the person must have used this element to cover up the truth. And it seemed that besides the artist, there was only one other person who could have painted that figure. Meanwhile, Min Hyuk went to see the suspect and told him what he had discovered about that night. The young man's expression instantly turned to panic. After some time, the young man made a request to have a song played for him. It was the song he had been listening to in the shower on the night of the incident. After the music stopped, the guy suddenly burst into laughter. Suddenly, he confessed to killing his mother. Of course, everything he said was recorded, but this proactive confession made the lead prosecutor suspicious. The murder weapon and the artist's body still haven't been found. Because they discovered he was lying, he proactively confessed. This is just too weird. Over here, Ma-ri and Ji-hoon followed the news about the painting and arrived at the lake. The only thing was, in the painting there used to be a small house, but when they went to check it out, they found it was gone. At this moment, Ji-hoon seemed to have noticed a clue. He went straight to the painter's villa in front of them and asked the housekeeper if she knew anything about the painter's whereabouts. When she didn't answer, Ji-hoon said he actually already knew where the painter was, and that he also knew everything that happened. Every case eventually reaches its end, and the truth of everything has been brought to light. Ji-hoon has figured out the story behind this case. Turns out, the painting hanging on this wall wasn't entirely painted by the artist while he was alive. To be precise, the scenery inside was painted by the artist. But the boy by the lake holding the black umbrella was painted by the guy in front of us right now. More accurately, except for the boy with the umbrella. This painting was completed 3 years ago. According to the data he dug up, the red house in the painting had been demolished 2 years ago. But if this was the artist's final painting, that detail didn't make sense. Earlier, he had an expert examine the painting. The boy with the umbrella and the lakeside scene were painted at least 3 years apart, which meant the artist had already died 3 years ago. Min-hyuk and the prosecutor were extremely surprised to hear this news, because just last night, the young man had confessed to where his father's body was, admitting to killing his father, and even pointed out the location of the murder weapon. Ji-hoon quickly cleared up everyone's confusion. After looking into the situation, he went to find the housekeeper. From her, he learned that 3 years ago, the artist had cut his wrist. Before the woman saw the artist, the father and son were in the studio with his paintings. Because of this unique painting, the woman and her husband had their first argument. Actually, that painting was done by the son, but to save the father's face, the son had lied at the time. Soon after, the two of them quickly got married. However, the woman quickly discovered her husband's actual painting skill level. The one who truly understood painting was his son. But none of that mattered, as long as in the eyes of outsiders, these beautiful paintings were all created by the hands of the artist. As long as he could make money himself, it didn't matter. Therefore, the gentle young man became a tool, painting in his father's place. But the father couldn't stand the false life, living under a fabricated reputation, and chose to cut his wrist to free himself from this deceptive facade. But with cold hearts, they didn't announce the artist's death to the public because of money, and instead made it look like a disappearance, because even the artist's birthday that day was a lie made up by all of them. And the spot where the painting hung in this gallery was actually for a different painting. However, because something unexpected happened, this painting was destroyed, and the person who destroyed it was the older sister. Even though they weren't blood related, seeing her younger brother had to use the dead father's name to paint every day, she really couldn't stand it. So she wanted to destroy everything, so her brother could escape this misery. However, that night, she got into a fight with her mother. She accidentally stabbed her mother. When the brother arrived, he saw the scene in front of him. Not wanting things to escalate, the young man used the excuse that the dead father killed their mother to avoid responsibility. But ultimately, this wasn't a perfect solution. He left his fingerprints on the murder weapon and dropped down the destroyed painting, temporarily replacing it with the painting his father had painted while still alive. Because his dad's paintings didn't have the boy with the umbrella, he added that himself. Then, the next day, he announced to the public that he was the killer. Hearing this, the young man broke down, crying and getting angry, insisting that he was the killer. At that moment, his sister appeared beside him and began to comfort him. Ji-hoon also gently comforted him, saying that if he kept going like this, he would only make his sister as miserable as his dead father was because of his lies. At this final moment, the young man couldn't take it anymore. The sister hugged her collapsing brother, with nothing left but concern and ultimate remorse between them. The case of the young killer was finally closed. The innocent young man was released, and the sister, for accidentally killing their mother, was taken to jail. After coming out, Ma-ri couldn't help but ask Ji-hoon why the woman, before she died, kept mentioning the young man. Even though it was her daughter who killed her, why did she still say the young man's name? Ji-hoon hesitated for a moment and finally gave an uncertain answer. As a parent, even if your daughter killed you, you'd still try to protect her to the end. So she wanted her daughter to use the young man. But as for specifics, he didn't know why either. At this moment, Ma-ri thought of that painting again. Ji-hoon joked with her that he bought it, but Ma-ri didn't believe him. She figured he must have borrowed it. On the way back, the two of them had a lively debate. On this side, after visiting his sister, the younger brother decided to leave this place and start his life over as a painter. Before he left, Ji-hoon gave him the last painting the artist had painted. This became the young man's motivation to keep going. Sometime later, after things had quieted down, Ji-hoon took a bouquet to the memorial of the artist he had once admired. The true identity of lawyer Ji-hoon was also gradually revealed. A strange lawyer who can't even pay his rent somehow can buy a painting worth 2 billion. With that kind of money, why would he insist on being a lawyer who only charges 1,000 won to help poor people get justice? The new intern Ma-ri still didn't know what Ji-hoon's background was. The next day, while organizing documents, Ma-ri accidentally discovered a photo hidden under a pile of papers. Looking at the woman in the photo, Ma-ri couldn't help but wonder if this was the ace attorney from the law firm she interned with before. Moreover, from the angle of the photo, it seemed like this woman had known Ji-hoon previously. Super curious, Ma-ri went to find the prosecutor, who had previously worked with him, asking about his past. The truth goes back to the gathering after the investigation of the first case ended. Back when the prosecutor's office wasn't as lively as it is now, their superiors were all involved in money laundering and corruption with corporations behind their backs. As subordinates, they could only turn a blind eye. But at that time, two people refused to follow their superiors' orders and began investigating a related corporation. One of them was Min-hyuk, who grew up with Ma-ri. That evening, he gathered a group of subordinates and headed to the corporation's headquarters. With the advantage of numbers, plus Ji-hoon having obtained a search warrant, the two of them were unstoppable, like tigers with added wings, as they boldly led everyone into the corporation's interior. However, the people upstairs were busy destroying evidence. They weren't pushovers either. To stall for time, they held up some of the team in the elevator. It seemed like they were one step too late, but just then, another prosecutor appeared. It seemed like he had anticipated this and had taken the stairs. Seeing the two of them busy at work, he calmly stood to the side, finding the crucial documents they had missed. After handing over the documents in his hand to the inspector, Ji-hoon then went to the office of the corporation's chairman, but he was helpless because the chairman had already destroyed all the evidence. At the same time, he was on the phone with his superior, telling them they were finished. But after the phone rang, Ji-hoon suddenly knocked the phone out of his hand, which the chairman hadn't anticipated. Completely stunned, the man was bewildered. He was trying to call their department chief. Why was the phone in Ji-hoon's hand? Seeing him so arrogant, the man tried calling another high-ranking official in the prosecutor's office. But just as planned, the call wouldn't go through. At the same time, a prosecutor walked in carrying a paper bag. It was only then that he understood how could he get through when the phones of all those big shots were right there in that bag. At this moment, he started to panic a little, grasping at straws, trying to call one last person. Unexpectedly, this call went through. Ji-hoon's heart skipped a beat, because that was the one person whose phone he couldn't get. The call was put through to Ji-hoon, and the person on the other end immediately started berating him, demanding he leave immediately. This person was the vice minister, a very high-ranking official. Just then, Min-hyuk, having finished things up outside, walked in. Having found his backer, the chairman smugly smirked at the two of them. Just looking at this guy's face makes me want to punch him a few times, but he celebrated a bit too soon. Our two prosecutors are all about upholding justice. So, a light bulb went off in Ji-hoon's head, and he immediately thought of a way to control him. Today just happened to be the Seoul Arts and Film Festival, and a lot of celebrities would be walking the red carpet. And of course, the one thing you can't miss is the reporters. So Ji-hoon contacted a magazine reporter he had worked with before. In front of everyone, he did something like this. Very unique and very creative. The corporation chairman and the prosecutor walking the red carpet together became the top news on every network. The next day, the minister saw it and was furious, but the whole public had seen it, so there was nothing they could do. However, after coming out, the female prosecutor had a question she wanted to ask Ji-hoon. Why didn't the high-ranking vice minister fire them after finding out? Ji-hoon didn't want to answer. Just then, Min-hyuk also came over and helped him out. He said it was because his father was the vice minister's direct predecessor, so this whole thing was left to him to handle. However, although they had caught the man, he would hire the most powerful lawyer to help him. But whether they could get him convicted by then was another matter. Things moved pretty quickly, and the interrogation of the man began. As expected, he brought in the most powerful lawyer from the Baek family in the area to defend him. This old man didn't go to battle himself, but handed this important task to a young female lawyer. That's how Ji-hoon and Ju-young met. Also because of that interrogation, Ju-young became interested in the man in front of her. Of course, Ji-hoon's side won that interrogation. After all, every case that landed in his hands had never been a failure, and the man was also temporarily detained. After leaving the courthouse, Ju-young took Ji-hoon to a quiet place to rest. She got a hot latte from the coffee machine. Ji-hoon politely took the coffee and tasted a few sips. She also really wanted to see the man punished, but because of her position as a lawyer, she felt extremely guilty about this. Ji-hoon comforted her, saying that he could understand, and at the same time promised Ju-young that he would make sure that the guilty parties received the punishment they deserved. Ju-young touched her lawyer's badge and earnestly asked Ji-hoon to win the case when the time came. The two stood side by side, enjoying the quiet for a moment. But who knew that continuing to investigate the beginning of this case would lead him to a big shot behind the scenes that he could never have imagined. This talented lawyer who couldn't even pay his rent was driving a limited edition supercar. His family's influence spanned politics and the economy, enough to live lavishly for 3 generations. He could enjoy a life of luxury, but he insisted on being a righteous prosecutor because he didn't want others to know about his powerful background. In the eyes of his colleagues and superiors, he was just a poor guy from an ordinary family. His department chief oversaw the entire prosecutor's office, just like all the big shots who were secretly colluding with businesses to launder money and engage in corruption. These rotten apples had caused a place that should have been enforcing justice to gradually become foul and putrid. But this couldn't extinguish the 2 bright, righteous gems. To continue investigating the whereabouts of the JQ Corporation's secret funds and to net all the big shots behind Chairman Choi. Ji-hoon's team has now identified a key figure. That is the head of the finance department of the JQ Corporation. Only he knows the whereabouts of their money laundering. However, he's also an old fox in the business world. What Ji-hoon thought of, Chairman Choi also thought of. Moreover, they didn't know that a few days after the department head got into trouble, Chairman Choi was bailed out by the Baek law firm. Chairman Choi quickly used his power to threaten the finance chief's family. Either be freed or jump from a building. He forced him to choose. On the way to the prosecutor's office, having been summoned by Ji-hoon, defense attorney Ju-young asked the man if he was still hiding something from her. She knew Ji-hoon was an extremely capable prosecutor, so there couldn't be any oversights when working. However, there was no way the man could tell her about what happened that day. Soon enough, the 3 of them met again in the interrogation room. Even though the 2 had discussed beforehand how to deal with Ji-hoon, they were unexpectedly cut off by a sudden question from Ji-hoon. Why did you kill the chief of the finance department? Hearing this, the man's pupils immediately dilated tenfold, because these words spoken by Ji-hoon were suddenly the same words the finance chief had said to him that night. Ji-hoon, having achieved his goal, continued the interrogation. You've met with the finance chief before, haven't you? Ju-young indicated that he didn't have to answer. However, the man's mind was already a complete mess. He stammered that he and the finance chief had met a long time ago. Ji-hoon pressed on, continuing to ask about the history of their conversations, because the finance chief's last conversation was a call to him, seeing his lie exposed. Chairman Choi quickly explained that after the corporation was investigated, the finance chief had embezzled tens of billions from the company, and he wanted to make him turn himself in. He was just digging himself deeper. After the other side finished speaking, Ji-hoon placed a blue bank book in front of him. This was the 55 million won savings account that Chairman Choi had secretly transferred to the finance chief's wife after he disappeared. Ju-young, sitting beside him, was also speechless. Who could defend such a despicable act? Seeing this, he started trembling again, his tone of voice becoming flustered. But he's still stubbornly saying, "Is it a crime to call him?" Ji-hoon leaned in close to the chairman and said, "Calling isn't a crime, but making the other person jump off a building or end their life is definitely a crime." With everyone watching, after Ji-hoon said this, Chairman Choi finally couldn't sit still anymore. Ju-young asked for a moment to rest. However, after Ji-hoon left, a recording of his conversation with the department head from that night was played in the room. This recording suggests he might have violated Article 253 of the criminal law, abusing his power to drive someone to their death. Simply put, it's no different than murder. And this is precisely why Ji-hoon summoned them here. Turns out, that day he had found the finance chief preparing to hang himself. After a brief conversation, Ji-hoon assured him that he didn't need to die, and not only that, the next time he met Chairman Choi, he would be very happy that he was still alive. However, the price to pay was that both he and Chairman Choi would have to face the appropriate punishment for their crimes. Back to the present, Chairman Choi was urgently taken into custody for abuse of power and coercion. While being transported to the detention center, a person he never expected to see suddenly appeared. The chairman, who was like a fish on a chopping board, suddenly saw him. His eyes widened. He was as happy as if it were a holiday, and he excitedly ran over to shake hands with him. That person was the finance chief. Seeing him appear, the chairman momentarily breathed a sigh of relief, as this meant he wouldn't be charged with murder anymore, and this was precisely Ji-hoon's final step in the judgment. The case quickly entered its final stage. Because there was a witness who came forward, the case quickly reached a verdict. Here in court, he admitted to all his money laundering crimes, but he seemed extremely happy because he didn't kill anyone. Afterward, he smugly got into the car heading to the detention center. As promised, Ju Young invited Ji-hoon out for a beer. The two of them were talking, and Ji-hoon suddenly laughed. Turns out this ice-cold man knew how to laugh. He didn't know why, but being around Ju Young made him feel extremely comfortable. Looks like the love bug has bitten our two characters. After eating, the two of them walked along the street. When they parted ways, Ju Young asked Ji-hoon a question. "Don't you date?" Ji-hoon very straightforwardly replied, "That's right, I don't date." Why? Faced with this straightforward guy, Ju Young was truly at a loss for words. The next day, Ji-hoon continued investigating the whereabouts of the money early in the morning. While in another conference room, a highly anticipated election campaign was taking place, the South Korean presidential election. And even more unexpectedly, the person in front of them was Ji-hoon's biological father, was the wealthiest prosecutor in South Korea at the time. His family's assets not only amounted to hundreds of billions, but he also had a father who was about to be elected president. Logically speaking, the future for the two of them should have been extremely bright. However, while investigating a money laundering case, Ji-hoon accidentally discovered a shocking secret. His father was unexpectedly the big boss, the mastermind behind this whole case. During the day at the prosecutor's office, Ji-hoon, through the recently arrested finance chief, learned that each time he went to collect money, he followed the address specified by Chairman Choi. The two sides never met, and he also didn't know who the other party was. Moreover, each time he went in a different car, he had already forgotten the license plate numbers. It was impossible to start an investigation from the license plates. Before leaving, Ji-hoon still noticed a suspicious point. If the money launderer was in the car at the time, then he would have seen the other party's appearance. Therefore, Ji-hoon immediately arranged for people to start contacting all the pawn shops and lenders in the area. Since money laundering is illegal, legitimate companies definitely wouldn't dare to do it. Thus, they could use this point to narrow down the search. Ji-hoon focused on small pawn shops. After gathering potential candidates, they brought them in one by one. They showed each person an album, which included a photo of the finance chief. If someone saw his photo and their expression was off, it meant they had met the finance chief before. With his main character's luck, Ji-hoon was spot on with his guess. After some observation, one person's cover was blown. With the little fish caught, the prosecutors dismissed the others one by one. Ji-hoon took out the documents related to him and studied his information. Multiple instances of impersonating public officials and lending money at exorbitant interest rates. A whole string of crimes was enough to put him behind bars for years. However, Ji-hoon didn't do that, instead feeding each sheet detailing his crimes into the shredder. If he told the truth, his past illegal activities would be overlooked. Then he asked the man about the finance chief. He hesitated for a moment, but quickly confessed everything he knew. The last time he met the other party was a few months ago. After handing over the money at the pre-arranged location, he noticed that his dashcam recorded the license plate of a parked car. 5 digits, min 3866. A black car. The numbers in front were obscured, so he couldn't see them. After learning this, Ji-hoon instructed everyone to investigate this car. As for himself, after finishing his work, he secretly went to his father's villa. Today was his father's birthday. Because his father was running for president, he could only come to see him at night when it was quiet. But as he went upstairs, Ji-hoon's eyes accidentally caught sight of something. His expression suddenly became unnatural. He originally wanted to talk to his father, but used work as an excuse to leave. He discovered the license plate of a car in the distance. Had the ending me 3866, which he was looking for. There was no doubt anymore. The owner of the car was his father. After returning, Ji-hoon couldn't believe all of this at first. He opened the video of his father's presidential campaign speech. Seeing him give a serious speech, Ji-hoon still couldn't believe what was happening before his eyes. Because his father, before running for president, had been a prosecutor. And not just any prosecutor, but one with a high rank. It was also he who had personally trained Ji-hoon to become an outstanding prosecutor. Of course, no one knew about all of this. Ji-hoon hid his father's identity, only because he didn't want to receive special treatment later on. However, he still couldn't believe that his father was suddenly involved in money laundering behind the back. However, the truth of the matter dealt him a fatal blow. The next day, Min Hyuk, through the process of elimination, finally determined that the person likely involved in money laundering could only be that person. The female superior couldn't help but look at Ji-hoon. She was the only one who knew his true identity. She advised Ji-hoon that the investigation should stop there. He couldn't investigate his father. Since that day, Ji-hoon fell into silence. His inner self struggled between justice and family ties. It was a conflict between public duty and private matters. At this moment, Ju-young appeared, and he suddenly had an idea. He asked her, "In all your plans, what would you do if the situation you encountered was the worst-case scenario?" "I might have to investigate the person I respect the most." Ju-young's answer was, "If it were me, I would still investigate, because this is the person I respect the most." Perhaps these words were the turning point in his life. After a moment of hesitation, Ji-hoon decided to follow his heart and asked his father to meet him. Since his mother passed away, this was probably the first time the two of them sat together to eat a bowl of hot black bean noodles. After a few simple words, Ji-hoon told his father the purpose of this meeting. He was about to receive a summons from the prosecutor's office. The man also guessed that his son must have discovered something. Before leaving, he hoped that his son could help him. Once he became president, he would change everything. However, Ji-hoon firmly refused. The next day, the father was summoned to the prosecutor's office. All the big shots were present. No one knew what Ji-hoon was up to. After all, they were unaware of the relationship between the two. When the day came that they saw the old man about to be interrogated, everyone's faces showed surprise. 4 people anxiously stood in front of the monitor, observing. The two inside the interrogation room began the questioning. Initially, the old man stubbornly insisted that he wasn't involved in money laundering, until Ji-hoon presented a document to him, causing him to fall silent. The 4 people outside, after witnessing the situation inside, also became anxious and uneasy, because they were also involved in this money laundering scheme. They all believed Ji-hoon was sure to catch their weak points. To ensure their safety, the other congressmen prepared to abandon the old man, to make it seem like he was the only one involved in the money laundering. But unexpectedly, all their conversations had been recorded by a listening device hidden under the table, capturing everything. This was also the only way to make his father change his mind, so he could see the true faces of these people. In the end, they still chose to let him take the fall alone. Finally, the father admitted his crimes and revealed that he had a list of other congressmen involved in the money laundering. He stated that the list would be sent to his son shortly. Afterward, both of them left. However, the old man didn't rush home, but took the elevator to the 18th floor. The father's aide called, saying he still couldn't find the old man. Suddenly, a bad feeling arose, and Ji-hoon quickly dashed out of the building, calling his father. The director uses rain to create a sense of crisis. Something terrible is coming. A loud noise rings out, and then the thing he least expected happens. His dad jumps from the building. His heart seems to stop. His mind goes completely blank, and everything fades into the sound of his agonizing scream and the pouring rain. His face is a picture of utter shock and unbearable pain. Just then, the phone falls out of his dad's hand. There's a call from an unknown number. When he answers, the person on the other end says, "Are you still there? Councilman Kim." An incoming call to his father's phone made him realize the gravity of his oversight and the enormous consequences it had caused. This incident left him heartbroken and filled with regret. His father's death might also be related to someone in the political circle. Because the old man's sudden death caused an upheaval, the prosecutor's office, wanting to quell the matter, used the excuse that the old man took political money and was discovered by the prosecutor, leading to his choice. Since dead men tell no tales, all those higher-ups involved in the money laundering scheme are now dumping all the blame on his dad. In the entire prosecutor's office, Ji-hoon is the only one who knows the truth. He's flooring it, driving like a maniac to his dad's place. Because his dad told him he had a list of all the congressmen involved in the money laundering. He's got to find out who's behind his dad's death. However, while searching, his older brother suddenly appeared, shouting and blaming him for their father's death. With the funeral not yet having started, he warned Ji-hoon not to do anything foolish. At the same time, the Minister of Prosecutor's Office found Min Hyuk and the female prosecutor and sternly warned them not to continue investigating this case any further. On the day the old man was laid to rest, Ji-hoon could only watch everything from a distance. He feels like he can't even face his own family now. But deep down, he vows to find his dad's killer. Even though Ji-hoon might look normal on the outside, his dad's death has messed him up. During a case that afternoon, he just sits there like a statue, pale and completely out of it, until the judge loudly calls his name. That's when he snaps out of it, fumbling around for the case files. Ju-young happens to be there, witnessing the whole thing. In the evening, Ju-young met up with Ji-hoon. At this point, she had no idea that Councilman Kim was his father, but she still wanted to comfort him. Even though he was touched by her good intentions, her words did not affect Ji-hoon. After revealing the truth himself, Ji-hoon left, leaving Ju-young with the shocking news. She sat there, stunned as if she finally understood everything. Their only clue right now was the last phone number that called his dad. However, the problem was that the call was made using a fake phone number. The only way to find the culprit is to start with those who are running this kind of fake phone number operation. Using the same old tricks, he summons them to check their transaction history and assets. The big shots are gradually being investigated, so Ji-hoon has caused quite a few mistakes for the high-ranking political figure. With no other choice, his superiors can only send their underlings to storm into Ji-hoon's investigation prison, directly seizing all the important clues related to the case and destroying them all. After that, he ordered him not to investigate further, or he would face retribution from the leaders involved in the money laundering ring. Finally, under pressure from the minister and his superiors, Ji-hoon had no choice but to halt the investigation. After that, he still couldn't find the person who had called his dad, and from that day on, Ji-hoon started acting out, all irritable and strange. Every day he'd just sit on the street, drowning his sorrows in booze. Then one day, Ju-young and her colleagues were hanging out together. She accidentally spotted him, and Ji-hoon quietly started following her. Soon, the sky opened up, and it started pouring. Ji-hoon just looked up at the sky, then lay down on the ground, letting the rain wash over his face. It seemed like it made him feel a little better. The rain snapped him out of it. He couldn't just give up like this. But when he turned his head to the side, Ju-young was suddenly right there beside him. The two of them just lay there on the ground, looking at each other. It was only when he saw Ju-young that Ji-hoon could manage a rare smile. They once made a promise. If Ji-hoon smiled at her more than 3 times, he'd agree to be with her. And this was his 3rd time smiling at her. After dating for 2 years, Ju-young took the initiative to quit her job and moved to a lively, close-knit little town. She also rented out a pretty spacious room on the 2nd floor, planning to turn it into a law office. On the day of the grand opening, she planned to have Ji-hoon quit his job as a prosecutor and go into business with her. However, Ji-hoon expressed that he didn't want to give up his work as a prosecutor. Even though 2 years had passed, he still couldn't forget that case. As long as he remained a prosecutor, he believed that one day he would find his father's murderer. However, the next thing that happened would once again change Ji-hoon's life forever. Back to our lovebirds, seeing the woman he loved right in front of him, Ji-hoon had a thought. Maybe it was time to finally let go of the case he'd been chasing for the past 2 years. He had a girlfriend who was always cheering him on, yet for 2 years, he hadn't exactly been the best boyfriend. So, that evening, he asked Ju-young out. He got down on one knee, pulled out the wedding ring he'd prepared, and with all seriousness, expressed his love for her. Seeing Ji-hoon's serious expression, Ju-young couldn't help but burst out laughing. This happiness came so suddenly that she thought it was all an illusion. It wasn't until Ji-hoon slipped the wedding ring onto her finger that she realized, with overwhelming joy, that it wasn't a dream. Her love had finally stepped out of the shadows, and it made her incredibly happy. But what made her even happier was that they were finally getting married. In the days that followed, the two of them were extremely happy together. Ju-young also successfully obtained her business license for the law office. However, while heading out to the elevator, she accidentally bumped into a man. Both of their documents went flying, and Ju-young frantically apologized and handed the man's files back to him. But it was this very encounter that would reignite the case that had been cold for 2 years. The man took the documents to a high-ranking official, but after looking at them, the official was confused because what he was holding was a business license for a law office. The most dangerous part was that the business license had Ju-young's office address on it. This was bad news. Very quickly, the man sent an assassin to ambush near the office, while Ju-young, over at the law firm, already had her first client. Mu-jang arrived at the door of the law office and first asked about Ju-young's attorney fees. She hesitated for a moment and then told him not to worry about the fees. Hearing that she only charged 1,000 won, Mu-jang breathed a sigh of relief. The two then proceeded to have a simple discussion about the case. After seeing Mu-jang off, Ju-young was on the phone with Ji-hoon while getting ready to take out the business license from her files. But when she opened the file, the information that spilled out was top-secret documents. And the information mentioned was none other than about Councilman Kim, Ji-hoon's father. Just as Ju-young was staring at it, completely absorbed, the assassin arrived at the office area. Luckily, after he went inside, Ju-young had already managed to slip away just moments before. It seemed like she had discovered something terrifying in those documents. She was getting ready to head over to the prosecutor's office herself to deliver them to Ji-hoon. The hitman, not finding what he was looking for in the office, quickly went after her. Since she couldn't get a taxi, she had to take the subway. On the way, she clutched the files tightly and called Ji-hoon, arranging to meet him at the station. Ji-hoon, all smiles and carrying a bouquet, made his way to the subway station. Meanwhile, Ju-young, completely unaware, didn't notice the hitman steadily closing in on her. She saw that she was about to arrive at the subway station, but sensed something was off. But in the end, it was too late. What awaited Ji-hoon was a scene more agonizing than anything he could have imagined. A dreadful feeling washing over him. As the train pulled into the station, Ji-hoon waited outside for a long time, but the woman he loved didn't appear. As if a signal had been sent to him, he started pushing forward when a horrifying scene of people scrambling out met his eyes. Something was very wrong. He quickly ran towards the crowd. He couldn't believe that the person he'd been longing for was slumped over in her chair. She had a deep wound on her stomach. Seeing him, she painfully uttered an apology and then fell silent. After a period of emergency treatment, the doctor finally delivered the news, expressing condolences to the family. Losing his loved one, Ji-hoon's life once again returned to a dark and gloomy state. His inner world was now numb. He even questioned whether there was any meaning left in being a prosecutor. Was it just to watch his loved ones, one by one, leave him? To avenge Ju-young, he decided he had to punish her killer. But the next day, what was unbelievable was that the supposed killer turned himself in at the prosecutor's office. Ji-hoon was already there waiting for him, and they met at the elevator doors. When the man saw the wedding ring on Ji-hoon's hand, he acted like he had no idea what was going on. And Ji-hoon became certain this guy wasn't Ju-young's killer. The real killer was still out there, free. Afterward, Ji-hoon went to clean up Ju-young's law office. The place had been completely transformed, but was now missing its owner. He looked up at the sign that read, 1001, for legal representation. Dropping a 1001 bill into the jar, Ji-hoon couldn't hold back his tears any longer. He desperately wished Ju-young could appear before him once again and become his attorney. Right then, Mu-jang walked in. After hearing the man say that this was the case Ju-young had taken on, in that instant, Ji-hoon made a snap decision. He would take over as this man's lawyer in her place. Back in the present, after hearing the tragic story of this difficult lawyer, the young heiress was in tears, unable to hold back. First, his biological father was involved in money laundering and a painful separation. Then his girlfriend was assassinated. Ma-ri really couldn't believe that the lawyer who was always smirking and a bit eccentric in front of her had such a heartbreaking past. Immediately, Ji-hoon's place in her heart did a complete 180. Just then, Ji-hoon got a call from the female prosecutor and went to answer it. The moment he opened the door, Ma-ri, seeing Ji-hoon behind it, had tears welling up in her eyes. Seeing Ji-hoon show up, the female prosecutor makes an excuse that she's got something urgent and leaves first. And Ma-ri is currently drunk. Seeing the lawyer she idolizes in front of her, her eyes suddenly show a tenderness she's never had before. Ji-hoon has his unspoken hardship at this moment. He has no idea that Ma-ri has been digging into his past, and just thinks she's talking nonsense because she's drunk. Lawyer Ji-hoon, you must have had a tough life. Ji-hoon, being a real straight guy, says that having to take a drunk intern home is such a pain. However, the tone of his voice is still very gentle and soft. Just when Ji-hoon asks for her address again, she falls asleep right in front of him. The next day, Mu-jang arrives at the office very early. Engrossed in watching car ads, he doesn't notice Ma-ri coming in, because his old car is several years old and has been having a lot of problems lately. He's looking at a trading platform that sells cars for really cheap. After taking a look, Ma-ri kindly warns Mu-jang that this is probably a scam. After all, selling a car that cheap is fishy. But Mu-jang, after hearing this, didn't pay it any mind. He figured that he could just pretend to be the director of the law firm, and that way, he wouldn't have to worry about being scammed anymore. So, after Ji-hoon arrives at the office, Mu-jang heads off to the car seller's location. After seeing Ji-hoon arrive, Ma-ri is no longer arrogant like before. Ji-hoon suspects she's up to something. After sitting down, Ma-ri suddenly offers to make him coffee. This makes Ji-hoon incredibly suspicious. He thinks she's about to ask him for a favor, and then he holds up his hand, indicating he'll go make it himself. He understands that there's no such thing as a free lunch. After making himself a hot cup of coffee, Ji-hoon voices his thoughts on her unusual behavior today, saying it's honestly a bit weird. Ma-ri, hearing this, can't help but pout. It's rare for her to show him respect, and yet he dares to throw shade at her. Over at a used car garage, Mu-jang changed into a different set of clothes and went to find the person in charge. First, he told him he just finished up at an auto repair shop then mentioned he was currently the director of a law firm. After confirming the car price was the same as online, he started a test drive, and overall, seemed pretty satisfied. Just when he was happily getting ready to sign the contract, the guy told him there's a problem with the car he's selling him. Mainly that there's a strange noise coming from the engine under the hood, and a noticeable shaking. Even worse, it's also leaking gas. The naive Mujang easily falls into their trap. They very enthusiastically introduce him to another car. The price is also a bit higher than this car, but this car looks really good, practically like a new car. Then they lay on a bunch of smoke screens. Mujang, hearing all the flowery sales talk, gets excited and uses all his money to quickly close the deal on this car. On the way back, Mujang's head was filled with fantasies of showing off this new car to everyone. He was excitedly speeding up to take him when, oh boy, a movie-like scene unfolded. The car suddenly burst into flames. Mujang got out of the car with a face that was black, both literally and figuratively. He immediately leaves everything as is, and with a face as black as coal, goes to find the manager of the dealership, demanding they refund his money, but the other party's firm attitude is added. He already signed the contract. Not only does he not get his money back, but he's also totally embarrassed. At the same time, within the prosecutor's office, they're holding a briefing on a new case. Recently, there have been instances of fraudulent car sales popping up all over the place, and they've formed a scam syndicate with a ringleader at the top giving orders. Because it involves money laundering, they have to catch the head honcho to take down the whole network and eliminate this criminal enterprise. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon, having waited all day and still not seeing Mujang at work, heads straight over to the laundromat. Seeing his partner's disheveled appearance, Ji-hoon quickly figures out what happened. When he sees Ji-hoon, Mujang immediately can't hold back and spills the whole story. After hearing what Mujang said, Ji-hoon rattles off the whole process that scammers usually use to sell good cars at cheap prices online, luring customers in and then selling them different cars at higher prices. After saying this, in front of the bewildered gazes of the two, he puts on a pair of sunglasses looking all cool. He brings his two partners to the car seller's location. This time, Ji-hoon is the one who deals with them directly, while the other two hide somewhere else. After a brief introduction, the three of them start the same scheme as before. After he test drives the car, the man says that this car has a few problems. The same trick they pulled on Mujang. First there's a strange noise, then some shaking, and finally, the car is leaking gas. What's even more outrageous than before is that even the tire comes flying off. However, for Ji-hoon, this is exactly the car he's looking for. After a somewhat over-the-top performance, he immediately tells the guy to bring out the contract. At this point, the scammer starts to feel like something's off. Something's not quite right here. So he decides to make a run for it, figuring he'll sort out the right and wrong of it later. He looks a bit like a potato, but he sure can run fast. But Ji-hoon's no slouch either. Seeing him run, he immediately gives chase. The two play a game of cat and mouse in the car garage. Finally, Ji-hoon, running too hastily, trips and takes a tumble. The car salesman, seeing this, laughs gleefully, mocking Ji-hoon. He might have been laughing too soon, because right then, Ma-ri zoomed up from behind like a superhero, and with lightning speed, she chucked Ji-hoon's fallen shoe, hitting the car salesman right in the head. The lesson here is, never mess with a woman. Ma-ri scored a direct hit, and then the two other guys got caught and spilled the beans. One of them claimed he was just a 23-year-old kid, and that they had a manager above them who was pulling the strings. After hearing this, Ji-hoon's mind immediately jumps to a more interesting way to play. The rich girl working as an intern for a billionaire lawyer would have guessed she'd be forced to dress like this. Not only that, but she's also infiltrating a scam ring. The manager, seeing it's a woman, flashes a smug grin. But who would have thought Ma-ri would suddenly speak up? Just give the orders. I'll do my best. Let's roll. The man is amused, finding this cute kid interesting, and with a little guidance from his underling next to him, the two successfully infiltrate the group. However, they had to split up to take action. Ji-hoon grabbed a notebook and started jotting everything down. The car salesman then brought over a list of things for new employees to pay attention to, telling him to memorize them. But Ji-hoon's mind was completely focused on the group of people in black suits who just walked by. Ji-hoon then faked a convincing stomachache, fooling the car salesman, and secretly followed the group. After successfully getting inside, Ji-hoon overhears some very important news in the room at the end of the hallway. Before 1 p.m. tomorrow, they have to come up with 100 million won. Suddenly, a sound makes Ji-hoon turn around. Luckily, the car salesman showed up just in time to get him out of the jam. It was a real heart-stopper. At lunchtime, Ma-ri prepares a hearty meal for everyone. After all, They don't have any money. They were driven to desperation and had to take this job. They're not bad people at heart. However, while they're eating, the group of people from earlier walks in with completely blank expressions. The car salesman very innocently asks how everything went. Ji-hoon has a bad feeling about this. The man walks over and kicks the salesman hard. As a senior, what he hates most is juniors being disrespectful to him. He pulls out the sales records and berates him, telling him to make money fast. At this moment, an underling next to him says something to the leader, but he's cut off before he can finish. Although he didn't hear clearly what was said, Ji-hoon heard that at 2:30 p.m., they'll start taking action. In the evening after returning home, Ma-ri gathered the chat logs of all the people who were scammed by them. Inside, there are records of many different scam tactics. At this point, Ji-hoon also shares his deductions. The words that the underling didn't get to finish earlier were definitely that they have to gather 100 million won. This money will then be handed over to the big boss above, and then at 2:30 tomorrow, they will gather and go to a certain location. So that also means they're not just ordinary thugs, but a nationwide organization, and this manager is simply the person in charge of this area. There, the managers of other areas, including the ringleader, will show up tomorrow. However, before taking action, just relying on the three of them won't be enough to stop them. Therefore, Ji-hoon remembers someone. The next day, there's a reluctant deal. The manager asks if anyone in the group has the ability to sell a supercar for 100 million won within 30 minutes. Everyone hears this and doesn't dare to speak up. Only one person very confidently tells him that he can do it. But when he sees the customer who's come to buy the car, it's none other than Min-hyuk. Ji-hoon lies, saying he's broke and has to work here. Then he leads Min-hyuk to the garage. Ji-hoon very skillfully demonstrates the tricks that scammers usually use. He very naturally shows off his performance. After letting Min-hyuk test drive it, he points out that the engine has a strange noise, and the car is leaking gas. Then he introduces him to a fancier car, more reasonable, high class but without losing its elegance, a blue and purple car. The naive Min-hyuk is thus fooled by Ji-hoon into thinking it's real. It must be said that Ji-hoon also has a promising career in this profession. Everything proceeds according to plan. The 100 million won is now in Ji-hoon's hands. Mission accomplished with flying colors. Just like that, Ji-hoon not only gains the manager's approval, but also earns his trust to be taken to the transaction location. However, they could never have imagined that, in reality, all of this was pre-arranged between Ji-hoon and the female prosecutor. She sent someone to coordinate and act out a scene with him, and they also installed a hidden camera in the briefcase full of money. Of course, Min-hyuk is completely unaware of all this, because this is a play. The more the characters don't know, the more realistic it is, and the more it can deceive the opponent. Besides, his acting skills are top-notch bad. Afterward, a few people get into a black car and follow the manager's car. Once they arrive at a car scrapping yard, they park nearby. For now, the police officer hasn't arrived yet, so they don't dare to risk going down. On this side, Ma-ri and Mu-jang are blocking the emergency exit above. And down in the parking lot, the mysterious ringleader has arrived at the scene, and managers from all over the country have gathered there. But right at this moment, an underling runs over to report that there are police outside. Instantly, the whole scene descended into chaos. A few people didn't hesitate and jumped into their cars to escape first, figuring they'd deal with the rest later. But the director had it all figured out. Right then, as they were about to get away, Ji-hoon blocked the only exit with his car, all while delivering an epic performance of coolness. Now everyone had no choice but to get out of their cars and approach him. But, getting this, seeing them coming, Ji-hoon turned up the arrogance even more, yelling at them, calling them a bunch of frauds. The thugs, seeing his defiant, "bring it on" attitude, completely lost it and started smashing his car windows and wrecking his ride with their bats. On the other hand, the boss, following his men's directions, took the stairwell to get out. But surprise, surprise, after breaking down the door, he was immediately caught by the cops, who had been waiting outside for a long time. At the same time, cops with weapons storm the burning car lot. Both sides fight it out, while Ji-hoon quietly gets ready to leave. In the end, the three of them hop into that bread van from before, and happily drive away from the scene. Little do they know, though, that not far away, out in the suburbs, a kidnapping is taking place. A man, who seems to be a high-ranking official, gets a strange phone call. After returning, a man in black, who is already waiting in the car, injects him with something. After he's done, he smirks and leaves. The next day, the same guy in black from the night before suddenly shows up at a law office. After their eyes meet, Ji-hoon's right hand, which has a ring on it, instinctively clenches. Just as one case closes, another one arrives. Today, the law office has a very strange client. This man is covered in expensive designer brands, clearly someone with money. So why is he coming to such a rundown law office? What's even weirder is that when he sees the wedding ring on Ji-hoon's hand, his expression changes instantly. Ji-hoon politely greets the client and even asks Ma-ri to make 2 cups of tea. From him, they learn that he wants Ji-hoon to help him handle a few things. When Ji-hoon expresses his desire to know what those things are, the man subtly probes him, saying that people who do big things inevitably get involved in some shady business. Then he says that as long as Ji-hoon helps him take care of it, he can have any amount of money he wants. No wonder this is the lead actor's performance. First, Ji-hoon turns down the guy's case, but just as he gets up to leave, Ji-hoon calls him back, making him think that he's just a money-hungry lawyer. After successfully tricking him into letting him see his ID, the guy's expression changes from before. Ji-hoon first breaks the ice by asking Ma-ri to print a copy of this ID. The man then tries to find a topic of conversation. He says that a retainer fee is probably a good option, and asks Ji-hoon if his retainer fee is 1,001. Ji-hoon replies, "That's right, but this time it'll be different. 1,001 will be charged per second. Each second is 1,001. So 1 hour will be 3.6 million won." The guy, after hearing this, readily agrees, no problem. He can pay any retainer fee amount. Ji-hoon is stunned for a few seconds, and the suspicion in his heart grows even stronger. After getting his ID back, the man leaves. Ji-hoon stands at the window, staring at him. Just then, Ma-ri brings the printed copy of the ID, and they're shocked. The ID copy suddenly doesn't have the guy's face on it. Immediately, Ji-hoon's mind jumps to the memory of his lover being killed 3 years ago. And combined with the look in the man's eyes earlier, he realizes something and runs out into the street like a madman. He's searching everywhere for him. Inside, Ma-ri is checking the guy's address and phone number. But strangely, all the information is fake. Ji-hoon, having found nothing, returns as well. Not wanting the two of them to know what's going on, he makes up an excuse. Later that night, Ji-hoon suddenly has a nightmare. Ma-ri has never seen him act so strangely before. Flashback to what the female prosecutor once told him, that Ji-hoon has been searching for someone all these years. She's a bit startled as she realizes that this guy might be the person he's been looking for. In a dense, foggy forest, the man from this morning is making a call to a mysterious person. It turns out his purpose in seeking out Ji-hoon today was to confirm whether Ji-hoon recognized him or not. After reporting that Ji-hoon didn't recognize him, he throws the fake ID into a fire. All of it, including the name, was completely fabricated. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon accepts Ma-ri's invitation to go to a pub for a beer. Ji-hoon orders some dried fish, the same dish he and his lover used to eat on their dates. However, Ma-ri doesn't seem too interested in it. Ji-hoon quickly demonstrates how to eat it. After peeling off the scales, he dips it in some sauce and offers it to her. Ma-ri is speechless when it comes to this eccentric lawyer. But all things considered, Ji-hoon hasn't smiled like this in a long time. After some hesitation, Ma-ri decides to speak her mind. She hopes he can smile more and not get lost in sadness and hide in the past. Seeing Ji-hoon's silence, Ma-ri then shares her earlier suspicion. She thinks that man is the person he's been searching for, and she hopes he can treat them as friends and let them help him catch the guy. Ji-hoon, although understanding her good intentions, still raises his hand to refuse. He doesn't want them involved in this difficult situation. But Ma-ri says those 2 words, "It's our wish." This puts him in a tough spot, because Ji-hoon had previously agreed to grant her 1 wish, and now she's saying that her wish is for them to help him. Seeing the sincerity of the young woman before him, he's moved almost to tears. The next day, Mu-jang, after learning about the situation from Ma-ri, also gets ready to join the operation. Since they don't have a photo, the 3 of them can only use a rough sketch of the man's face. Looking at this guy's 2 sketches makes me speechless too. Luckily, Ma-ri is also an art genius, so she manages to save the day. The other 2 are also amazed after seeing it. Compared to their drawings, they're a bit at a loss for words. Thanks to Ma-ri's very accurate drawing, they quickly spring into action. To verify the identity of that man, they go to the fake culprit, using the excuse of wanting to reduce his sentence, and ask him to take a good look and see if the person he met that day looks like this guy. He takes a close look at the picture and recalls the scene from back then. Because he couldn't pay his debts, he was tied up by some guys. Just when he thought he was a goner, suddenly a figure brought him a chance at life. Someone walked up to him with 300 million, asking him to take the fall for a murder. After confirming that the person in the photo is the same guy, Ji-hoon asks about the location of the gambling den, but after the three of them arrive at the place, they find it's already turned into a warehouse. But strangely, the print on their clothes feels very familiar. They quickly go to find Min-chul. This warehouse was opened by him. He'll know the location of the gambling den. After all, he's been in this business. After some probing, the three of them finally determine the real location of that casino. They get dressed up all cool, fully prepared to stir up some trouble. The screen shows the three of them, a chaebol heir bringing his rich heiress friend to a secret casino to experience the thrill of making money. In a place called Fantasy Island, it seems like you can't win any kind of bet. On the way here, Ji-hoon took out all his savings and split the 1,001 bills among the two of them, keeping only one for himself as he approached a fish tank. The whole crowd was betting on which direction the fish would swim. He immediately spotted the trick played by the man. Then the act began. The little fish indeed swam towards where he scattered the food. With Ji-hoon's sharp eye, he only needed one glance to spot the key. Ji-hoon just smirked and quickly took out a 1,001 bill and placed it on the table. While things are going smoothly for Ji-hoon, on the other side, Ma-ri and Mu-jang aren't having much luck. Even though they're immersed in the thrill of gambling, the god of gambling isn't favoring these two. Mu-jang's stack of cash is dwindling fast. And not only that, he even lost his watch. It seems this guy isn't cut out for games of chance. Ma-ri, on the other hand, seems to be doing a bit better. The main character's aura is likely making her lose a bit slower. However, the most captivating spot on this fantasy island is probably where Ji-hoon is standing. His presence even catches the attention of the casino boss. A bunch of guys in black show up and take Ji-hoon away, while everyone else is still excited. The lively scene suddenly calms down. But before Ji-hoon goes, he doesn't forget to bring his intern along. Then the three of them are led to a dark room. The boss begs them to leave and has even prepared a sum of money for them. However, Ji-hoon's attitude is different. He's completely playing the part of a big-shot gangster who has nothing but money. Ji-hoon looks at the pile of money on the table with disdain and says, "This isn't even enough for snacks." But in the next second, he turns around and says they just need to tell them the whereabouts of one person. Looking at the sketch, the man thinks for a long time and then says he has a slight impression. At that time, he received a call, and the person on the other end said someone would help a gambler block his debts. Quick as a flash, Ji-hoon immediately grasps the crucial clue. Who was the person who called him? However, the answer the boss gives is completely unexpected for Ji-hoon. After going around in circles, they're back to square one. Turns out the person who called the boss was Min-chul. This makes Ji-hoon furious. He wants to punch the guy a few times. They went around in circles all night and ended up back here. Under Ji-hoon's pleading, Min-chul tells him another clue. Not long ago, that person was still in contact with him, asking for his help to stop a man. This man's identity is the director of Company K. He was about to attend an event, and that person asked him to prevent the director from reaching the venue. But after the plan was drawn up, that person called again, saying they weren't needed anymore. However, there's one thing that Min-chul feels is a big coincidence. A few days later, the news reported the death of that director. Ji-hoon asks for the location of the event hall, and then he finds a letter that the man had entrusted to him at that time. This is the invitation letter for that event. Meanwhile, that man approaches the hidden figure. Because he finished off Director K, he'll get the chance to replace him as the new director. The hidden figure seems to have also predicted that he would take care of Director K. However, he's not interested in how his subordinate manages to snatch this position. Poor ability can only prove that he's still inexperienced and naive. But then again, if dogs bite each other, they might end up hurting their owner. What do you think the outcome will be? Hearing this, the man immediately tenses up. Luckily, the mysterious person was just teasing him. Over at the prosecutor's office, the death of Director K has attracted their attention. Plus, not long before, a congressman was released, and the vice president of a construction group did something. In short, these three big shots are all connected to the financial secrets of the JQ Group. The JQ Group is a secret organization connected to a money laundering case that they investigated 3 years ago. This case is also the reason why Ji-hoon lost the two most important people in his life. Through nearby security cameras, the prosecutor identified a black car with the license plate number 9510. Without hesitation, they went to the car's location using surveillance cameras. The car had been parked there for 3 days. However, the camera footage was too blurry, and they couldn't identify the man. Their only option was to stake it out from inside their car. Just at the critical moment, Min-hyuk needs to go to the bathroom. The female prosecutor, alone in the car, spots the man's movements. After confirming the target, she quickly grabs her phone to call Min-hyuk. But this doofus, when needed most, can't be reached. Unexpectedly, the man doesn't get into that car, but into the one next to it. Time is of the essence, so she has to leave him behind and drive after the guy herself. It's a classic Korean drama car chase. Luckily, the phone finally connects. After telling Min Hyuk the license plate number, at least until the director decided that she shouldn't catch up. Just as she was making a turn, a pedestrian walked out, and she couldn't avoid hitting a truck. Of course, she lost the target. After that, the team gathered together. Even though they lost the suspect, a search of the car with license plate 9510 turned up an invitation. The event was happening soon, so Ji-hoon and the other two hopped into their cool-looking food truck and headed to the location. To make themselves look rich, the three of them dressed to the nines. The combination of their beat-up food truck with their slick suits and fancy dress took their look to the next level. They walked right in, naturally, and then split up to do their thing. Just as planned, not long after the three of them got inside, Min Hyuk and the female prosecutor arrived with their invitation and also started to split up. Over here, Ma-ri got stuck with some young rich guy. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon ran into the person he most wanted to see. He followed the guy, but after walking for a while, Ji-hoon saw something he couldn't believe. The man he was following walked in front of someone and suddenly bowed respectfully. What's more, the other person looked incredibly familiar. It was Mr. Baek, from the Baek law firm, which also happened to be the very same firm where his girlfriend used to work. He remembered back to the day the incident happened. It seemed like it was also the day she resigned from the law firm. This scene truly shocked Ji-hoon. After Mr. Baek left, Ji-hoon grabbed a knife and followed closely behind. The man who was the killer who murdered his love was right in front of him. Ji-hoon couldn't control his emotions and took steps closer to his back with the knife. At the same time, the man seemed to sense something was wrong and turned his head to look, but he didn't see anything unusual. Ji-hoon had vanished, leaving only a knife at the scene. He chose not to act there. His cool head reminded him that he couldn't let the guy off that easily. The hall was getting packed with more and more big shots, a lot of them from the prosecutor's office. Turns out, there was going to be an auction here, because a mysterious figure was also going to show up. After leaving, Ji-hoon went back to meet up with Ma-ri and Mu-jang. Ma-ri told him about the clues she had discovered. It turned out that the guy named Cha who came to their office last time used to be the secretary of the JQ Group's chairman. Speaking of the JQ Group's president, the hall suddenly erupted in enthusiastic applause. Big shots that people normally couldn't even dream of meeting were all showing up here. And this guy was the main event of this auction. Starting at 10 million won, the highest bidder would win the chance to dine with him. You have to understand that just getting to know someone this influential is a huge honor. Without hesitation, the bidding started immediately, quickly hitting 50 million won. Just when everyone thought the price couldn't go any higher, someone in the room suddenly shouted out 100 million won. The whole auction hall turns to look where the sound came from, and, surprise, surprise, it's that lawyer guy who can't even pay his rent on time. When the chairman sees Ji-hoon, his smug smile instantly turns into a dark frown. Turns out, Ji-hoon recognized something in the chairman's voice. He's realized that this is the same man who called his father right after his father died. In other words, this guy is the one who's been pulling the strings behind everything all along. The event wrapped up pretty quickly, and Scarface was happily heading to his new office. But Ji-hoon had already gotten there ahead of him. In his words, there was no hint to Scarface. "You are the one who killed my wife." Seeing his cover blown, Scarface pulls a knife out of his pocket and slowly approaches Ji-hoon. But he had no idea that Ji-hoon was secretly a martial arts master. Ji-hoon slams a book straight into his chest with one powerful blow, nearly knocking the wind out of him. Realizing Ji-hoon's not a pushover, Scarface stops holding back. But against a martial arts expert like Ji-hoon, that knife is useless. Now he's not crying for his dog, but instead, he's just bawling, begging for his life. Suddenly, a flood of images from that year flashes through his mind. This is the guy who used that very knife to take the life of the person he loved. Just as he's about to stab him, Ji-hoon stops himself, because he remembers something his lover once said. Ji-hoon decides to let him live. For now, after returning home, Ji-hoon pins all the important clues on a board. The mastermind behind everything is the chairman of the JQ Group, and he's the one who ordered the Baek family and Scarface to kill. Seeing the old man from the Baek law firm, Ji-hoon feels a pang of guilt. His granddaughter, Ma-ri, is right by his side now. Is she going to end up walking the same painful path he did years ago? The next day, Ji-hoon goes to the office to meet with the two of them. After thinking it over all night, he finally makes a decision. He gives up the chance to meet Chairman Choi. At the same time, he seriously asks Ma-ri a question. If the person she respected most did something she hated, what would she do? Ma-ri doesn't get what Ji-hoon is implying, but she answers sincerely, saying she could never be like him back then. She's not as strong as he is. Hearing this, Ji-hoon seems to make up his mind about something. Before leaving, he takes off his sunglasses and puts them on Ma-ri, saying the sunlight outside is a bit harsh, so she should wear them. Then, he says goodbye to the two of them and leaves. The two of them look at each other, bewildered, not knowing that this will be the last time they ever see Ji-hoon. As for Ji-hoon, after he visits his lover's grave, Moo-jae gets a text message that turns out to be Ji-hoon's goodbye. He also left a letter for Ma-ri with the things he wanted to say to her. A year later, Ma-ri returned to her family's law firm, becoming the top ace attorney at the company. She could handle any case, big or small, with total professionalism. But the one thing she couldn't figure out was where Ji-hoon had gone. Even though Ji-hoon left without warning, the two of them, Ma-ri and Moo-jae, still regularly went to the law office to take care of Ji-hoon's fish tank and clean up. As for Ji-hoon, he's now in a small, remote town, where he's become a part of the local community. After leaving the law firm, he chose to go back to being a 1001 lawyer here. Right now, he's introducing himself to everyone, talking about his track record, 55 wins, 1 draw, and 0 losses. His impressive record ranges from petty theft cases to hit and runs by VIPs, and even cases where the suspect is called a devil of the century. He rattles off this whole list, not forgetting to throw in his signature 1001 catchphrase. So, no surprise, he's about to get some new clients. An old lady has come to him for help. She says her son was arrested by the prosecutor's office not long ago. She hopes Ji-hoon can deliver her life savings and this letter to the prosecutor's office. She insists her son isn't guilty and hopes the prosecutor can release him. Taking the items, he looks at the pale-faced old lady in front of him, and Ji-hoon tells her to go home and wait. After getting back, Ji-hoon reads the old lady's letter. It mentions the pharmaceutical company JQ. He searches online and finds a bunch of news about the arrest of a researcher due to the drug's side effects. So, the next day, Ji-hoon fixes up his hair again, puts on those familiar sunglasses, and heads to the prosecutor's office. Meanwhile, Ma-ri is being given flowers by some guy, but then, as she's tucking her hair back, she spots a very familiar figure. She can't believe it, and runs over there as fast as she can. When she finally gets in front of him, she realizes it isn't just her imagination. It is him. Ji-hoon instantly says it's not him. Scared like a little kid being yelled at by Ma-ri, immediately runs into the elevator to go down to the lower floor. But you can't run from your problems forever. And Ji-hoon finally had to face the music with Ma-ri's interrogation. Where have you been? What have you been doing? Right then, the whole lobby freezes, and she is super embarrassed. After telling him to meet her downstairs in a bit, Ma-ri grabs the bouquet and quickly heads down. Then, she starts smacking Ji-hoon in the face with the flowers. She's furious that he just up and left without a word. Just as she's about to give him a real beating, Moo-jae, who got a text from Ma-ri, also arrives. You'd think it would be a happy reunion with hugs and smiles, but nope, the greeting is a punch that practically sends him to meet his ancestors. After that greeting is over, the three of them get together. After a year of being gone, Ji-hoon's sudden appearance leaves them both frustrated and annoyed. Actually, Ji-hoon had already explained everything in the letter, but Ma-ri just didn't pay attention to the rest of it. Then Ji-hoon explains to the two of them that it's just that he almost killed Scarface back then, and he felt his heart was also affected, so he decided to leave. He said that when he finds a proper way to handle this issue, he'll come back then. But about Ma-ri's grandfather, he doesn't say a word. After getting back, Ma-ri actually finds another letter inside the envelope. In it, Ji-hoon also wrote about the purpose of his departure this time. The next day, Ji-hoon goes back to the familiar law office. The fish in the tank, under the care of those two, are still swimming around happily. Moo-jae finally gets to meet the owner of the place, and Ji-hoon doesn't dodge the issue this time either. He generously transfers about 15 million won to the landlady for rent, utilities, and other things. Actually, taking a 1,001 fee doesn't mean he only has 1,001 in his account. Moo-jae is shocked. He never imagined Ji-hoon was loaded. He's been fooled all this time. Just then, Ma-ri arrives. Actually, after what Ji-hoon told her last night, she's already over being mad at him. But Ji-hoon still sincerely apologizes to the two of them, and he even joins their team to compete with the Bake law firm. Finally, the three of them are back together, and the small, lively office is once again filled with laughter and chatter. And now, it's time for Ji-hoon to put his revenge plan into action. The first person he targets is Scarface. Seeing Ji-hoon reappear after a year of being gone, Scarface is terrified. He's now hiding as the director of the JQ group. He looks the part now, with no sign of a man who's done terrible things. Ji-hoon strolls up to him all nonchalantly, saying a few things that freak him out. He didn't hesitate and cut right to the chase, telling him to pass a message to his boss. He was back. This time, he wasn't running away like before. He even messed around with Scarface a bit. After they left, the three went back to the prison to find the guy who took the fall for Scarface. They offered him one last chance to get out of prison, help them with an appeal, and then apply for release. The guy didn't think they could win the case. But as soon as he said that, the three of them burst out laughing, almost spitting out their drinks. They had to let him know that Ji-hoon was the kind of lawyer who had never lost a case. Seeing their expressions, the man is momentarily confused. After a bit of hesitation, he finally has no choice but to believe them. But the three of them still don't forget about the legal fees, which is, hand over the 1,001, buddy. After that, Ji-hoon takes the other two to the mansion he's living in. Even though he'd heard Ji-hoon was loaded, Mujang couldn't have imagined he lived in a place this huge. Meanwhile, Ma-ri is focused on the photo of the suspect stuck in the glass, which includes her grandfather. Ji-hoon sees this, takes down Mr. Baek's photo, and then tells Ma-ri that her grandfather is not that kind of person. The reason he can say that is because he had already gone to see Mr. Baek by himself before. From their simple conversation, he realized that this was indeed a righteous man. But to be sure, Ji-hoon still showed him a picture of Scarface and asked if he knew this person. Mr. Bak answers without hesitation that he had met him once at that event. Every little thing, including his gaze, makes Ji-hoon certain of one thing: he wasn't involved in the murder of his wife. Ma-ri, hearing this, also breathes a sigh of relief. They begin to take action. First, they go find Scarface, who's playing golf, and show him the alibi of the guy who took the fall for him in the Ju Young murder. Even though Scarface is fuming, he manages to hold it in. First of all, it's because our main character isn't someone you want to mess with. Second, having reached his current position, what he fears most is losing everything he has. So, in front of the public, he can only let Ji-hoon do as he pleases. Meanwhile, Ma-ri and Mujang, standing nearby, also take the opportunity to snap some pictures of them looking like close buddies. You'd think it would stop there, but nope, Ji-hoon is like a ghost, clinging to him. Wherever he is, Ji-hoon appears. Ji-hoon's goal is simple: to let the big boss behind Scarface see the chummy photos of him and Ji-hoon. Being a suspicious person, he'll misunderstand and think his subordinate has betrayed him. Sure enough, the episode plays out just as the scriptwriter intended. The chairman sees the photos and immediately calls Scarface to interrogate him. Scarface sees the pictures and quickly explains, but the chairman looks at him like, "Do I look like I trust you?" To show his loyalty and eliminate a potential threat, Scarface was ordered to take out the fall guy who took the blame. The next day, Ji-hoon went to the prison to find the man, but was told he had to wait. The guy was in the hospital, in a coma. Scarface disguised himself as a doctor and quickly injected poison into the fourth drip. The hospital made an announcement, and Scarface had already finished the job by then. Later, Ji-hoon went to the hospital and met with the female prosecutor. Turns out, he had planned it all along. That evening, he had already guessed that Scarface would make a move. So, he used Scarface's plan against him, luring him out to get evidence of the poisoning. And as soon as this news went public, Scarface would be arrested for murder. The news spread like wildfire. In no time, the whole country knew about his crimes, including Scarface himself and the chairman. He called Scarface, told him to meet at a location, and said he was ready to get him out of there safely. Actually, it's not hard to guess. Knowing too much leads to death. The chairman wanted to prevent future trouble, so he planned to kill to silence him. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon is secretly following the scarred man's car. He goes to the seaport, where the scarred man is surrounded by a group of people. Only now does he realize that he was just a pawn for the chairman, to be discarded at will. And now that he's no longer useful, it makes sense to get rid of him. He's surrounded by the group and quickly beaten until his nose bleeds. After struggling to resist, he desperately tries to escape. Seeing the assassin getting closer and closer, right at this moment, a black car suddenly speeds in. What's even more surprising is that the person who arrived is Ji-hoon. He had already guessed this scene would play out. Seeing the guy desperately calling for help, Ji-hoon kindly opens the car door for him. This is also why he came here. After rescuing Scarface, Ji-hoon starts using psychological tactics on him to make him realize he's no longer of any use to that respectable chairman. Scarface can't take the pressure and spills everything on Ji-hoon. It turns out he did kill his wife, but at the time, he only wanted to steal that confidential document. As for the matter of his father, It also involves a secret of the JQ Pharmaceutical Corporation. This chairman is also quick on the uptake. Before Scarface could finish, the chairman was already calling him. Hearing Ji-hoon's voice, the chairman's tone immediately changes. But before he could even speak, Ji-hoon cut him off. The chairman is now scared out of his wits. It took until the third call for Ji-hoon to finally suggest a meeting. Meanwhile, Ma-ri, under Ji-hoon's instructions, returns to her grandfather's law office and goes into his study, logging into his account with his help. Quickly, she finds what they're looking for. The document about Councilman Kim, who is also Ji-hoon's father, is right there. The first thing to do is immediately tell him the news. Turns out, JQ, in order to expand their company, needed to push for legal changes to loosen regulations on the painkillers they were making. To get the laws amended, the top brass colluded with assemblymen and prosecutors. Ji-hoon's late father was the chief secretary. After getting the gist, Ji-hoon goes to meet Chairman Choi. This is also the first time the two have officially met face to face. Ji-hoon, with a stone-cold face, reveals what Ma-ri just told him. The chairman, upon hearing the information, still tries to make excuses, but Ji-hoon doesn't let him drag it out, directly stating that Scarface told him all of this. The other guy's expression changes. Next, Ji-hoon starts to goad him. He's wearing a hidden camera. All he needs is to record him admitting to the murder himself, and with a witness, it's enough to convict him. But he's a real sly fox, stubbornly refusing to admit he killed anyone. After the first attempt fails, Ji-hoon goes to Ma-ri to get the document and meets up with Min-hyuk. They manage to record Scarface admitting he's the murderer, and Chairman Choi is the mastermind. He hands them the document. The assemblyman mentioned in this document, along with a list of assemblymen involved in money laundering that year, is very likely the same one his father wanted to hand over to him. This means that if they can prove this document is valid, they can prove JQ Group colluded with political figures. Right now, the only way is to find that money laundering list from back then, but it's been 3 years. And this list is impossible to find. Just when they're racking their brains, the captured Scarface suddenly says something. He once snuck into Ji-hoon's father's office and stole a part of the list. Although the original was turned in, he still has the photocopy hidden. Following his lead, Mu-jang goes to his office and finds the photocopied list. After comparing the list with the top-secret document, they indeed match. Next, it's time to make Chairman Choi confess to the murder. First, they upload their entire findings online. After kicking up a huge fuss, they have Scarface call the chairman, pretending to surrender and agreeing to turn himself in to clear the chairman of suspicion. The chairman takes the bait, but he has one request. This request is also exactly what Ji-hoon wants, which is for them to go alone to the meeting place he sets. Everything is going according to plan. That evening at the seaport, the chairman brings a whole gang to surround them. If that happens, Ji-hoon will be in a really dangerous situation. One wrong move, and he could be a goner, but they have to take the risk, so they can crush his last hope. Only, the price to pay is truly as bitter as the sea salt. The chairman, having fallen into the trap, doesn't sense the scheme within, his face smugly looking at his prey. Ji-hoon also puts on an Oscar-worthy performance, experiencing what it's like to have only a few hours left to live. Ji-hoon once again asks the key question. Ju-young, was she killed on his orders or not? The chairman, with an excited look on his face, directly admits to doing it. The current situation leaves Ji-hoon with basically no ability to threaten him. He's gloating, even revealing the cause of his father's death. On that night, he had called Councilman Kim. Because he didn't want Ji-hoon to get dragged into it, Councilman Kim chose death. And now, Ji-hoon is about to die at his hands too. After saying this, he points a gun at Ji-hoon's head. Looking at his smug face, of course, he has no idea that all of this has been captured by Ji-hoon's hidden camera. After getting the evidence, while he's still standing there laughing, Ji-hoon twists the gun away, then turns and runs. Unexpectedly, he's also pretty quick, managing to pick up the gun and pull the trigger. At this life or death moment, Ji-hoon quickly jumps into the sea. He even fires a few more shots for good measure. When Ji-hoon's silhouette is nowhere to be seen, thinking he's a goner, he leaves the scene. Meanwhile, Scarface confesses to his crimes. The female prosecutor brings Min-hyuk before all the other assemblymen and plays this video. The scene shown in the video is exactly what happened that evening, including all the crimes Chairman Choi admitted to. With this trump card evidence, even if the prosecutor's office wanted to cover it up, they wouldn't be able to hide the chairman's criminal acts. In the end, the senior assemblyman can only choose to order the chairman's arrest. With all the witnesses and evidence, the chairman of JQ Group is sentenced to life in prison. Now, only the case of the assemblyman colluding with JQ Group remains, and it will be handled by a special prosecutor. That person is none other than Ji-hoon. Turns out he didn't die back then. After regaining consciousness, he quickly called Ma-ri. 3 months after the case was handled, on the final day it's finally concluded. Ji-hoon successfully apprehends the director of JQ Group and the money laundering assemblyman on the list, handing them all over to the court. He returns to his own law office. Not only did he create a miracle, but he also became a hero in everyone's eyes. But his retainer fee is still only 1,001. Why 1,001? Because he's the 1,001 lawyer. A lawyer who, no matter where you are, will appear beside you when you need him most. Quirky but incredibly righteous and honorable. And with that, the drama, $1 Lawyer, comes to an end. What did you all think of this drama? Like and subscribe to the channel for more dramas next time.